Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're in YouTube and you see a little link down below, you can get to Zoom, and then you click on the little link down below and you get to Mukana, and you can ask questions there. You can talk with other folks in the chat, and we'd love to have you. Now, if you think that you watch all of this and you think that you could actually answer the questions, we would love to have you actually join the conversation, this panel, this illustrious panel. So if you think you can do that, then be here 6:40 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. It's constantly changing and evolving, and we have all kinds of new talent, new wisdom constantly being added to the panel, and we'd love for that to be you when you're ready. If you're not sure if you're ready and you want to come and hang out with us and just see how things feel in the panel, you can get here as early as 6 o'clock a.m. Pacific Standard Time when we open the doors. Talk about all kinds of stuff. It's kind of a wandering conversation. But we also, one of the primary reasons it's there is to get to know anybody new coming in, as well as checking their system and kind of just seeing how things go. So please join us if you think you can answer some of the questions that we're talking about here. At 7 o'clock, of course, we have the general Q&A. Any questions that you have about media production or virtual production. We are a little low right now, so if you have questions, this is going to be a good hour to ask them, or a good couple minutes to ask them. So go ahead and throw questions into Mukana, and we'll process them. Second hour is something that we think is a little bit more important that we want to spend a whole hour on. Today we're going to talk about really the challenges and the process of digital first events, and we're going to kind of distinguish a little bit between online events, digital first events, and hybrid events, which are all three different things. And we'll talk about what makes them different and what are the challenges and the opportunities with digital first events. Again, we're going to keep on coming back to that because we think it's going to be an important piece of the future. Tomorrow we're going to do part 2 of AWS. The crew really knocked it out of the park last Friday, so we're going to be talking about building in AWS. So come in for that on Friday. Saturday, of course, is education. So we have education for 2 hours, and then we have Resolve training. And so we're going to have the guys from Ripple Training coming in. And then at noon, we're going to have, last week we had just a huge success with a Raspberry Pi building, but we're going to start talking, we're not going to get started doing anything, but we're going to start having a conversation with Roger Wagner. He is the designer of the Hyperduino. And I think we're going to work with him on building an Arduino just for our group to learn together and build out and design what that kit's going to look like. So I'm pretty excited. Roger is a visionary when it comes to tech education, and so it's going to be a real interesting opportunity to have him involved. So he's going to be here at noon. We're excited to have him, and hopefully you'll join us too. This is a kind of brainstorming session. What would we want to do? We're then going to go back, oddly enough, to Raspberry Pis the following week, and we're going to do that for a little while Roger kind of puts together the kits that we need. So anyway, so stay tuned for that on Saturday, and then of course Sunday is just the open session. So yeah, well, Bill, let's go ahead and take it away.
All right. The first question comes in from Michael in Munich, who starts by saying hi and then says, are there any online mic check websites you're aware of? I'd like to understand if my volume is fine or if I'm too low or too loud. Thanks for your great show.
Guy, how's that going?
Oh, man. We are... It's not going to detect me, but if you go ahead and talk, it's just you lead meters. Go ahead and talk.
So if I'm going to be talking here and you can see me talking, and that's going into Guy's little service or what he's working on right now to show you where you're at. And
so this is a local version. Oh, right. Yeah, this is a local version, but the idea is to put this up in the cloud in a Zoom room so that it can come in and you can prep yourself and then be ready for air or leave it into a whole meeting. So eventually we'll have this work. It works right now. It's just the big thing is trying to get it so that we don't get billed 24/7 for Zoom for AWS instances that cost $750 a month to run. So there's a business model there. It's just how do you make it so that it actually doesn't cost you money to operate. So we're working.
Guy, could you put that on a live website, just a regular website that you could go to? Could you do that, do you think?
Well, the idea is to bring it into Zoom so that during a meeting, people can constantly check their stuff. That's the idea. So you can see how it works right now with meetingmeters.com is the name of it. And the benefit is that it'll bump up your Zoom meeting to 720p. So there's like a side benefit. It's like twofold. You get meters and you get a bump. So it's a kind of a cool deal.
I think that'd be interesting to, at some point, to have a service kind of like the Skype call testing service, hello, this is Skype call testing service, and then you say your little thing and then it comes back. And they never did a video version of that, but I think it would be useful to, for a long time, I would traditionally do that right before Mac break. you just go up there and do it and listen to it back. And I think that that's the reason a lot of people's audio is so bad, is because they never hear it. They never hear the return of what they actually sound like. If they did, they would fix it quickly, because most of them sound horrible. Chris?
My experience would be, even if you had that service, you're right, most people don't do it, and most people don't care. They think if I sit in front of a screen and I can see and hear you, that I must sound and look fine too.
I think it is. It's just that those of us that are competitive want to know, and then there's the people who don't care, and the people who are getting all the jobs, and so that's the then people start to care when it starts to become one of those things. And again, it's like showing up, bad audio and bad video is like showing up with a t-shirt cutoffs and flip flops, and those people don't care either, but eventually you learn to. I definitely didn't dress well as a child or as a teenager, but I figured out how to make it work, so that I could move forward. Go ahead, Mickey, and then Hasmukh, and then Charles.
I just want to add, like, if you're doing a show and you have a target level or a standard that you're trying to hit, like, aligning your microphone to meters makes sense. But if you're just jumping on a meeting with other people who aren't lining up to anything, like, I would just put it on automatically adjust level, just because it knows what everyone's level is at, and you are aligning with everyone, because that's what's most important, I think, in the meeting, that there is a standard. Like, it doesn't matter, like, if you're hitting -30 lufs or -20 lufs, as long as everyone is on the same level, that works out for meetings.
Yeah. Hasmukh, and then Charles.
I used to put my corporate logo in meetings at the top right-hand corner. Now I put the WLM meters. So we're working with, I'm on a board of a non-profit company that distributes thousands of Zoom licenses to the universities. So we just finished with a board meeting, and they were all asking me, what is that meter up there? So I'm explaining to them -24 and all that kind of stuff. And they said to me, well, we can't quite hear you. So I said, because you're listening to your computer speaker. I got IEM. So put on headphones, then you'll have a proper audio. And it just became a lesson.
That's great. Charles, and then Courtney.
Yeah, I think that as a society, we are starting to move in that direction. In the beginning of the pandemic, only a few of us cared, and even I had to learn, and I learned from watching Office Hours and asking you guys questions. But now as the zeitgeist for our society and how we communicate is starting to change, and the importance of this, as we've been trying to teach everybody, is changing. I think more and more people are starting to pay attention, and even my aunt, who is 72, was asking me about getting a microphone and some headphones and how should she set up her Zoom room,
Right.
So.
Well, and there's always people who, that aren't going to care about anything. They're not managed, and the thing is that they just always fall victim to the folks that are. That's the thing you have to always look at when you're doing this is, I think I've talked about this before, and I won't belabor it, but my father's a lawyer, and he will tell you like what tie he wears, and how he presents evidence, and how he presents himself, and how he opens up a question. He can tell you exactly why he's doing that, and exactly, and it's all planned, and then he goes up against lawyers that aren't like that. They're just kind of wandering around. They don't really care. They're a little disheveled or whatever, and he throws them into the wood chipper. That's why he wins so often. And so, on the top of evidence, he just, they don't understand, that all of that matters. How we present ourselves matters, and it might be subconscious, or it might be conscious, but it all matters. And when we don't take that into account, we basically are just giving up something that is relatively easy to fix. Courtney, and then Jesse.
I agree with most of what Mickey said. One thing is to find a mixer or an audio interface that lets you hear yourself along with the other people, and that helps a lot. And that helps you beforehand to get rid of the things that you can hear, like plosives or distortion, anything like that on the front end of your mic. But the problem with a web-based type of interface that you're talking about is that every online conferencing system is a bit different, and so
Yeah.
What works on Zoom may not work on Teams, what may not work on Skype, but it'll be different levels for each one.
Exactly. I think that having something that sits inside the platform that you're using makes the most sense. So the Zoom one is for Zoom meetings, which is what most people are using. So it's pretty applicable. Jesse?
Yeah, the reason I like Ulean meters is because we have this graph over time. Very easy for people to comprehend and understand, and I bring it in if I anticipate someone's going to be a bit stubborn on, the extent to what they want to go with their microphone and things. You can see the sort of drop off or the change over time between different panelists or guests. So no explanation required.
And the thing I know Ulean does this as well. I think we're probably underneath the threshold right now, but I know with Spectre, one of the things that was great is having colors connected to the history meters, so that they change. Purple meant low to us, green meant great, yellow meant we're getting close to too hot, red was you're peaking. And by putting those in, you didn't even need to know what the numbers were. You didn't need to see that it was -24. You just look at the color, and know what you should be at. Go ahead, George.
I just wanted to add in, it's made a big difference using the WLM meters for me, and just pushing overall. Office hours is just, we talk about all the tiers of money we spend, but I'm on a prompter right now, and I'm still tweaking it, but it has made so much of a difference in the past couple of days, and it really exposes you to how much you can do and make all of this better.
I think I've said it recently. I've realized that when you have a really good setup, as most of us who just kind of grew up as average kids, just kind of fitting into the thing. I didn't know what it was like to be a 6'4" Norwegian model until I had a really good video setup and a really good audio setup. And you walk into a meeting and everyone's just staring at you, they're all just like, wow, that looks really good, why, you don't need the genetics anymore. You just need a good camera, good mic, some lights, and you're good to go. All right. Go ahead, Paul, real quick.
Yeah, real quick. I found a meter that's on a website. It's on, I'll put the link in the
okay, great.
Mukana.
All right, great.
There you go.
Next question.
Brant Kruger of Minneapolis, Minnesota says, are the daily Zoom reminders something that's available via settings, or are those being, and I love this phrase, thank you, Chad Mechanical Turked?
Well, no. So the proper term for that is actually chatinator. It's a chatinator. But the daily reminders are actually built into Zoom. So the reminders that the every 5 minutes in the chat in this area is the chatinator. The emails out are the 1 hour ones, which I've learned to use as a template. As my little mailing system. At first I didn't realize. I thought, I have to figure out how to use, MailChimp or whatever. And then I realized it was going out. It would be great. The little thing that I would like is to put the content above the link, so that people read through it rather than, the links are at the top. You can do that with the thank you for subscribing area. So it's not like they don't have the technology to do it. They just decided that they don't want to do it. And for me, it's frustrating because basically what it would do is it would drive a behavior of reading through what we have to offer. And that's, if you just said at the beginning, this is down below or whatever, you would be able to drive a behavior of reading through it rather than looking at the top of it. And so I do a couple things. You'll notice that I'm constant. I don't know if you'll notice. I don't know what people notice and what they don't notice, but I experiment with white space a lot. My brain, for a variety of reasons, focuses very much on white space, probably too much. That's why I have trouble reading. And so I play with white space on how it attracts people's eyes to jump and look down. So you'll see me constantly moving. If you look at the ones that over history, you'll see me constantly changing how much white space is between days and how much is white space is below things. And it's all I have to work with because I can't make anything bold. so you just kind of play around with ways of seeing whether it affects behavior or not. And so anyway, that's the. But it's a really powerful tool, though, to be able to tell people what's going on every day. I haven't had time to really take full advantage of it, where this is what, I'm trying to work towards the idea that I tell you, this is what's coming up tomorrow, and here's your homework. Like, here's things that you can read before you get there, and here's things that you can check out, and here's like a little, like it is an opportunity to be a little newsletter. And so I'm working towards that. It's just been a function of time. But it's actually a relatively useful tool. Next question.
Jesse Mills from here in the panel from the San Francisco Bay Area. Does anyone on the panel have experience using Sienna NDI router, Rascular Route Master, or Zen NDI router in complex NDI systems where you've made custom routing panels?
Sounds like a 1F Jeff question, or a Tucker question. Fortunately, we don't have them here today. They're the ones that are really doing the most. The one I would ask them directly on Discord if they're not here. So we don't have, and also a lot of times they show up on video days. Is when you see them more often than, or tomorrow. If you ask it tomorrow morning, I bet you Jeff will be here because we're doing the AWS, and Tucker and Jeff will be here. So, and that is, by the way, a design in the system is. Over time, the goal has been to slowly start creating days where there's more people to ask a certain kind of question as well. So there's general questions, but like, for instance, audio has become, there's a lot of audio folks that show up on Tuesday, and there's a lot of educators that show up on Saturday. And those are probably the two most pronounced in our group right now. But my goal is to get to a point where, video questions, general video questions are a great thing to do on Wednesday, and, that type of thing. And we're still working towards that. Next question.
Ryan Jordan of Columbus, Ohio says, I have a Logitech C922 Pro, and it has ghosting with motion. This was checked in Zoom and in OBS, and the behavior was the same. I thought the camera was 1080p 30 frames per second. What could be going on?
Good, Stuart.
I'm going to touch on all the system things and not the actual camera. Firstly, make sure you're not running on battery, because if your power settings in your computer scale back the CPU, you'll get less performance on the USB bus. Also, make sure you've got it on a USB 2 or USB 3 and not a USB 1 or by mistake. And from there, then start going into the camera settings, and no doubt somebody else will pick up the camera.
Good, Jason, and then Courtney, and then Felipe.
I'm not going to deal with camera settings. I'm going to go with something along the lines of a USB bus saturation. I would look at my system resources monitor and see if I'm peaking the CPU. That is almost always the culprit. He doesn't specify whether. So yeah, Ryan, are you on Mac or Windows? If you can follow up and tell us, that might help. The two-handle webcams vary differently. So yeah, that's what I got.
Courtney, and then Felipe.
And make sure you have plenty of light, because those require a lot of light, and ghosting is usually a sign of the sensor cranking up the gain so much that it's doing a long exposure. In other words, it's opening up. It's exposing for a long period of time.
Go, Felipe.
Yeah, just picking up on what he just said. Shutter speed, light. You need a lot of light, so your shutter speed is not too low or too big.
I'm hearing myself back. I'm trying to see if that is. Oh, that's Felipe. Felipe, you're feeding us back to ourselves. I'm gonna guess. I'm gonna go with Courtney and Felipe and guess that your problem is low light. So try sitting outside. Just take your webcam or something and go outside, or go near a window during the day and see if you still see that ghosting. When it runs out of gain, it starts basically running out of reasonable gain. The camera will automatically start slowing down the shutter so that it can get more light in. So if you get half the shutter speed, we'll get twice the light. So it'll try to suck those up. And what you'll see with that is a lot of motion blur, which I think is what you're talking about with ghosting. I think that everyone else was kind of going toward, or a lot of other people were going towards technical, of which it could be. But if you're seeing it, when you go like this, if what you're talking about is you see a lot of motion blur, it looks like a kind of dreamy, then that's the camera not able to handle the amount of light that you're giving it. It needs more. Next question.
TJ Asher of Minneapolis says, please recommend cable strain release solutions for a Blackmagic Pocket 6K. Power, USB-C, HDMI, XLR, and so forth. No, he has a small rig cage.
That's great. Jason, and then George.
Jerk stopper is the way to go. They're a little pricey, but they last forever, and they have saved many of my rigs over the years.
Good. George, and then Mickey.
So TJ, you can use these think tank whips.
We're getting feed. You're doubling up, George.
Me?
I'm not sure. You were. No, you're not. Go ahead.
So you could use these whips. Also, just get our Velcro strips, and you could just tie it onto the cage and just do it that way also.
I use Velcro a lot. Go ahead, Bill.
It's another company called Tether Tools that makes the same kind of things. They started for the DSLR crowd, but they have a lot of things that go on small units and provide great strain relief.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Small Rig makes this little block which has HDMI and also USB-C connectors, and they have like I think 4-inch tails that go out that you plug into the camera itself, and it's essentially like a little mini patch panel for your camera.
That's cool, and it goes. Then it connects to your small rig.
Yeah, it has I believe quarter 20 screw holes that you just put into the cage.
That is slick. That's very slick. I've not seen that, but now I must have one. All right, next question.
Bo Cardle of Charleston, South Carolina. Did I hear rumblings of an upcoming Unreal Engine deep dive with Nick Justison?
Oh yeah. So it's gonna be a hybrid of what we're doing with other training. So Nick's gonna produce some. This is gonna start April, first Saturday of April. Nick will be doing basically some videos for you to follow, and Nick and I are kind of talking through some of those. Then we'll start most days with this will be 10 o'clock in the morning on Saturdays in April, and just in April. And basically what will happen is there'll be a little bit of open Q&A. You can just ask any questions you want about Unreal. Then Nick's going to show you something that we're all going to work on. Then we're all going to work on it. And it's going to be kind of that open lab kind of layout that we found to be so successful with the Raspberry Pi group. So basically what we'll do is we'll all work on what Nick just showed us, and we'll try to do it. I think it's one of the things that we've been missing is the doingness of it together. The Raspberry Pi really opened that up for us of how powerful it is when a whole bunch of us are thinking about it and like, where do I find this? And go over and look at that. And this isn't working for me. And having Nick there and a couple other people that are that are into Unreal, hopefully will show up as well. And so we'll have, and then all of us just figuring it out together. We do think you'll be able to use a Mac or PC. There's some issues with video input on the Mac side, but we're going to supply you with a green screen that you can just use. It's going to be building a digital set for this first one. We'll see how that goes. So really the stuff that you've seen Nick do, we're going to talk about how to do that. And so that starts in April, and it's hopefully just an introduction to understanding Unreal and real-time 3D. Real-time 3D is going to be a big deal. So we want to get people thinking about it and get their head around it. It's kind of permeating a lot of things. And there's so many things we can do, whether it comes to education, broadcast, film, all of those things are going to be affected. Corporate communication, all that's going to be affected by things like Unreal and Unity and even Apple's AR and USDZ. And so all of those things are things that, in addition to the other things that we're focused on, we're going to pay some attention to. By the way, we're running a little low on questions. We probably won't make it through the first hour with them. I mean, we can come up with things to talk about. but if you have questions, this is going to be a good day to do it. All right, go ahead, Bill.
Paul Wallace is up next from Austin, and he wants to reflect back on there. Is it possible to have a web-based sound meter? And then he says like this one, and he's got one linked there in the chat.
I think it'll be. I think we kind of discussed it a little bit already, but I think that it being accurate on a web page will be the chances of it being accurate will be very low. So you can kind of talk through it and you give it a shot. I don't know if it'll give you the information that will actually be applicable to a meeting in a specific meeting. So I think that's the challenge. Next question.
Comes from James Babbitt of San Diego, and James says, please discuss catch lights in the eyes. When using the Nanlite 25 mounted above and to the side, which light would I add to get a catch light?
Go ahead, Jason, and then Bill.
Catch lights are usually used, for really, really specific shots. There's a slight catch in my eye, and basically the way that it's done is with a highly directional light that is designed to add 3D to your eye. But keep in mind, your eye has to be big enough in the frame to actually show up that way, which is why generally, I think, unless you're doing a movie, this kind of shot is done primarily for photography, right. not generally, over zoom. But yeah, it's doable.
You go ahead, Bill.
So in the legend that I heard when I was learning this stuff is that there was an actress named Merle Oberon in the early days of film, and one of her cinematographers did that, and they actually started calling the light the Obi, and it was a small light posted right above the camera lens, and its purpose was to add that glint in the eye. Eyes are, of course, reflective, and they are also curved, which means any light directly in front of you will be reflected off, including computer screens, lights that are lighting you from that angle of incidence. So literally, if you want to catch light and make it bigger, you can just put a light in that angle, make sure it's not so bright that it blows away your other lighting, but it will reflect in their eyes and become the catch light.
Good, Mickey, and then Courtney.
Yeah, back in the day before LED lights, we used a lot of Dido lights mounted on the camera as a catch light. But knowing that you're using a LumiPad 25, I'd probably look at the LumiPad 11 and put that right by the lens, or maybe even something smaller like those little nanlights or aperture like boxes that have the magnetic base to them.
Yep.
As long as they're close to the camera, you'll get the nice reflection.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I have and they're also useful for people like me who are wearing a hat. I have one down low that gets under the hat and shows up in my eye. I just dimmed it out there. And the other thing is, the closer you are to the axis of the lens, the more it removes wrinkles. So that's why it's been known as a Merle Oberon, and a lot of actresses insist on those lights because they wash out the shadows and the wrinkles, and it makes their faces look smoother and the bags look less likely under their eyes.
Well, also called, not because you needed it that much, but also called Oprah lighting, because Oprah has this little up lighting. We were at, a lot of folks have little panels. The Roscoe little light pads are really popular on actual news desks that we found, because they're really small and they just sit right. So they'll have their monitor that they're looking down at for information, and around it will be oftentimes these little Roscoe, which are just real thin glass, side lit glass that it's a pretty popular way to kind of bring up some uplighting. We're kind of going away from catch lighting, but generally think about your lighting as being, for this kind of thing, often you want to think about the light being right in front of you, because the idea is readability, and not as much Rembrandt lighting. But it does look nice, but it's nice to be able to read people and really see them there. Next question.
Ronnie Settle of La Plata, Maryland says, for House of Worship live streaming, do you have any suggestions for improving the audio stream? Currently, our team is mixing on a separate X32 and it doesn't sound bad. I was thinking about adding some room microphones. Would any audio plugins on the main mix help?
Yeah, go ahead, Jesse.
Kind of depends on what's happening already, but if you add room microphones, what does a room sound like? I would say, with streaming in general, it's probably important to have a limiter plug-in. It's probably important to balance the dialogue and the sermon, in a church sort of setting with the music. So getting clarity and balance is probably key. But if you want to post the link in Discord or Mukana or something, we can listen and provide some tips.
Yeah, absolutely. Mickey?
Yeah, just in terms of improving, say, the house mix versus what goes out to the stream. Oftentimes you'll have a lot of variations, especially with instruments, because if it's loud in the room, you don't need to boost that up in the PA. But if it's an instrument that's relatively quiet, that's typically fed out to the PA. So you'll need to rebalance those. And on top of that, for web streaming, it's oftentimes very compressed dynamic in terms of dynamic range. So you'll want to maybe control the dynamics a bit and push things a lot louder than what compared to what you would send out in the PA.
And this is one place where you want to go the opposite direction of a lot of things, where you're better off taking whoever's doing that mix and get them. You may already be doing this, but get them into another room, get them as far away from the program as possible, get them on headsets, because that's how people are watching it, at home. So or oftentimes are. So it's a different way of approaching that problem than most times. And the further you can get away, if you don't hear any of the house noise itself, you're going to be able to really hear what this actually sounds like, and that's going to help improve it, probably more than almost anything else. Next question.
Brian Bavado, Detroit, Michigan, here says, I purchased a Pile TechRise combo to have as a compact travel setup. I'm having a problem with the need to slightly unseat the 1/8-inch mic connector to make the audio pass. Has anyone else had this problem?
Yeah, we all have that problem in the newer ones. So the older Tech Rises were set for a TS, and the newer ones are TRS. And you can get an adapter that is a mono to stereo adapter, which should actually work to make that work. But otherwise you do have to pull it out one notch, which is super annoying. Go ahead, Courtney.
Or you do what I did, which is just, if you know how to solder, cut the end off and put a TRS connector on there, and don't connect the ring to anything. So just connect the shield to the shield and the tip to the red wire, and you should be good then.
It sounds like a Saturday project.
Soldering project.
Well, we're going to do more and more on Saturdays. And soldering is definitely on our list of things to work on. The next question.
Chris Wilder, Lafayette, Indiana, is here with opinions on Panasonic's Lumix BGH1 for a recording studio. The announced firmware update looks interesting.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Well, it's already on Netflix's approved list, which means they've tested it and they've said it's a good camera. I would expect Blackmagic will come out with a competitor to it very quickly, but it looks ideal sized for small studios or for even use on drones. The mounting options are fabulous.
It looks a lot like the micros, the micro studios that Blackmagic had. It's just that it's modern. Those have been around for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years at least, and haven't been updated. And so I think that they're taking advantage of that. Yeah, it does. And it's interesting. A lot of the stuff now is, supporting things when you start seeing LUTs, the ability to export out, a variety of things. And I don't know whether it does. Yeah, it does log, output. So it's pretty interesting camera to take a look at. Next question.
Keenan Campbell of Princeton, Illinois says, I got my MixPre 3. Thanks everyone for the recommendation. And thanks to Guy for taking one of my hard-earned Alex's. Has anyone done a tutorial about this device for Zoom? The manual is pretty dense and complex.
I think we should all chip in and just pay Mickey for like 2 or 3 days of him just working on a little tutorial and putting it out there. I think we should just all chip in and have Mickey do a little video of all the little things you have to do to get ready for Zoom. I had someone that's I was talking to him about it, and I was like, oh, I have a person that you need to talk to. I was like, I can kind of explain it, but he can really explain it. Go ahead, Hasmukh.
Yeah, I preempted this question last week while I was on vacation. So Mickey has helped me on 3-4 different routings on the MixPre. So I decided I'm going to take a image of the MixPre and put it into Keynote and give step-by-step of how to set it up for the first mic, and then how to set up your headset, and then how to route the MixPre to make the knob a fader, and so on and so on. So, and then I'm going to turn these into videos, and then we'll put it on Discord.
That sounds great. So we might have to have I think how many people here have MixPres? Just curious in the panel. So it's a fair number of us. I'm very tempted to have a MixPre hour, just so we all can just talk through that process and have it at least on video, so you can go back to it. I mean, like just a video of us discussing it, and then Hasmukh's more focused ones will be perfect. Hasmukh? Oh, can't hear you.
Zoom.
No, if you want to, I can just show you a screenshot of one of them. I send it to Mickey for approval. Okay. So there's quality control.
What we should do is we should put it out, but we should then have an hour where we can discuss it, because I think the two of them together will be good. Like you could listen and watch something and have us discuss all the things you can do with it, and then have that. So we'll talk about that, Mickey.
Yeah, it might be interesting for say like your idea for the Raspberry Pi, like Saturday.
Oh yeah, like a Saturday.
You have several in a meeting, though, several breakout rooms of say like breakout room for routing music, a breakout room for your monitoring setup.
Yeah. We'll maybe a Saturday coming soon. Next question.
Jonathan Swan from Upper Marlboro, Maryland says, is there a way to save a low resolution image that it can be blown up without losing quality? Vectorizing makes it look cartoony. I wonder if there's some program that would have AA to add pixels to a low res image.
Or AI, I think. Go ahead, Jason.
There are a fair number of them as far as like ones that will really impress you. Photoshop has grown by leaps and bounds, but honestly, there is no substitute for proper resolution straight away.
You're creating something out of nothing. You might be able to get it right, and AI is getting better at doing that, but it's not perfect. And I think that most of the time what Adobe likes to do is they like to say, this is what bicubic looks like, and this is what our new thing looks like. What they don't say is this is what the original looked like. Like what you need to do is go, here's the original, here's the zoomed down version, here's the zoomed up version. That's the thing that you should be comparing. Like, what did it do, and how did it compare to the original scan or whatever you're working on? Adobe likes to use little cards to show that off. And so bicubic has been something we've been doing since 1990. It's 30 years old, and so it's not really a good example of what to do there. But to Jason's point, not having pixels is not having pixels. And so it's never going to be as sharp or as good as it was if you had the original. What you really want to do is try to get more pixels and then go down to that. Go ahead, Bill.
There's also a system that they all use, or at least has been used a long time, where a poster frame that's rasterized lower than the original is created at the same time. And they use that the way that we in video use proxy and original footage. You can work with the proxies, then switch to the original, and it will essentially remap more resolution onto what you're working on. But that's
next question.
Peter Moore of Auckland, New Zealand says, given CV19 has changed, everything regarding lockdowns and so forth, is it pertinent for office hours to have a second hour discussing home office studio ergonomics, best practices to avoid things such as repetitive strain and carpal tunnel problems, back strain, and so forth? Note, including recommendations for chairs, desks, monitor stands, cable management, and so forth.
Yeah, go ahead and put that in the second hour. It's definitely a good second hour discussion to have. I don't know if I'm the best example of it, but but we should definitely talk about it and trade notes and talk about what's important there. Absolutely. Next question.
Ari Block of Tel Aviv, Israel is next with, when streaming a Zoom into Facebook, I've had a talent mic'd up to a lavalier mic taken into an ATEM mic 1 and then into OBS as an audio input. About 20 to 30 minutes into the show, the audio from the lav mic started to jitter, stutter continuously. What could be the cause of this?
Go ahead, Jason.
Bad cable or a saturated USB-C bus. I'd say those are the most common ones. Didn't Victor have an issue like that? And what we found was, you plug directly in with USB-C into, at least in his case, a MacBook, and it worked like a charm. That said, I would start there.
It sounds like a saturated CPU to me. So it sounds like that OBS is trying to get more out of the computer than it has to give, and that's a pretty common problem with OBS. Go ahead, Mickey, and then Jeffrey.
Yeah. If it's something, it depends on what apologies for the dog. It depends on what the sound is like. If it's like clicking or if it sounds like a digital artifact, then I would probably think of the USB bus. But say if it's it sounds electrical, I would probably think that it could be a capacitor in the ATEM, but it's hard to tell without knowing what the noise is.
Good. Jeffrey, and then JJ.
I'm having some similar problems with that with Wirecast, and hopefully it's not happening right now. But the real question I have is, do you hear it in Zoom and then Facebook, or just Facebook? Because that's going to be the determining factor of which part of the chain you need to look at.
Yep. JJ?
I've had a similar issue with OBS of late, and even though the CPU doesn't seem affected, you can watch that in the meters in OBS if you keep that up active. The graphics processing unit also, right around 20 minutes, starts to overheat the computer. So I might try to upgrade the computer.
Yeah, it really, when we've seen this happen in Wirecast and OBS, it's almost always been a CPU or GPU issue, or little things like there's a little behavior. We had a problem years ago where about 20 minutes into a Wirecast stream, this is 10 years ago at the time, so I don't know if it's applicable now, but just to give you a sense of it, we were like 20 minutes in, we lose sync all the time. 20 minutes in, we lose sync. And we were trying to figure out what was causing us to lose sync at 20 minutes, in our test streams. Well, it turned out, in a lot of streams, just a little bit, it would just suddenly shift and be out. You got to this is weeks of us trying to figure this out. It turns out that in the show, our operator would listen to the first 20 minutes of the show and then pull their headset out of the computer. Pulling the headset and putting the headset in and out makes Wirecast go out of sync. So make sure that the reason I say that is, like, you can chase down all these things, but look at what you're doing at 20 minutes or 30 minutes, because it could be something completely, different than, it could be a behavioral change that 20 minutes into a show, you do something different and it causes it to, and so you're looking through all these technical things, but it's a funny thing. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, another thing, if you're dealing with thermal throttling, maybe you can run a little application on the side that just monitors your temperatures of your CPU and your GPU, and that will tell you if it's throttling down, and that could be causing a lot of your problems. Just keep an eye on the temperatures and the CPU and GPU speeds. HW monitor will do it.
Really quick on that headphone thing, the reason why is because what Windows does is when you plug in a headphone or microphone or anything like that, it might figure it as a new audio input or output, and so the whole system has to change things. Even if I do it in Zoom, if these earphones go out, it'll change the whole landscape. So that's probably why Wirecast was doing that. He was on PC, and so my suggestion is to just watch the resource meters, because it also could be, if you got Dropbox running, it could be downloading a file. If you've got another program running, it could be taking up the hard drive space as you're doing that, especially if you're doing everything on one PC, recording and streaming, going to Zoom, all that other stuff. If you can separate it, it'll be better. But if it's on one PC, you're definitely going to need to take a look at your resources.
Yep. Next question.
Dan G. of Irvington, New York, wants to talk about Stream Deck and Companion, and specifically wants to poll everybody about their favorite function and their most complex functions in those tools.
What are people using Stream Deck for? Yeah, go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, mine, which I'm actually setting up today or continue to set up, is actually connecting to my HDR monitor, so I can switch back and forth between all my color modes and I don't have to reach over.
How does it do that? How do you connect to the HDMI monitor from a Stream Deck?
So FSI has the app that you download into your Stream Deck and everything. And if you call them, they will actually walk you through it, which is what I've been trying to do, but I haven't had the time because I've been so busy. So today I'm planning to finish that, but that, and also some of the resolve selection and techniques. Since I only have the mini panel, I can do that on the Stream Deck, and some things for Photoshop and things like that. But it's been great. You just have to take the time to set it up.
Yep. Go ahead, George.
For most of us that have monitors grown in our office spaces, I use Stream Deck to bounce between all my to move my mouse sensor between 6 different monitors. So there's just shortcuts in the app, and I just build shortcuts into the Stream Deck to move my mouse around.
In its most basic form, I use this little one a lot of times when I'm doing presentations, because I don't want a bunch of keys. I want like forward, back, like just a handful of keys that are there, and I can reach down and I don't have a lot to choose from. So, I do have the regular one, and then I have an XL at the office, and so I'm using the XL mostly for Unity. To connect to that stuff, and then this one is kind of all purpose that I put into doing a lot of different things. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Couple music things that I've done. I've tried to emulate what QLab does, and just on camera switching, not on other programs. But I do that, and then I have another computer that does all my graphics, and I switch to that. And then of course my PTZ cameras. I've got setups for that.
Go ahead, Bill.
I just wanted to note that when Charles says FSI, that's Flanders Scientific, and those are high-end monitors. If those of you are looking for that software on your computer or to buy it, it's not going to really work that way.
Go ahead, Hasmukh.
Yeah, this may be an overkill, but on my Stream Deck, I have my buttons for all the different office hour meetings, pre-show, office hours, post-show. So I just press a button, and then I have a button for Mukana, and I have a button for the panelist view, and it launches my browser. And then I've learned to do macros on my ATEM, so I start putting some of the macros on the buttons as well.
That's great. Go ahead, Guy.
Mine's probably the mute button for just flipping it on and off, and then I have it for fade to cut to a graphic. And then one of the coolest things I've seen that I've programmed on mine is Shirig and I have an instance up in the cloud, and my Stream Deck can control that instance. He'll say, give me a 2-up box, and I can hit on my Stream Deck the 2-up box, and it'll pop ready for 2 panelists in a Zoom discussion to feed it in those boxes. He says 3, and I hit 3, and 4 Stream Decks change across the country when on that hit. So it's 0-tier VPN that's being utilized. So 4 Stream Decks are controlling 1 vMix instance. So that's about the most complex thing that I've seen done, and it's really cool. It's fascinating to see something move like that up virtually somewhere else and on somebody else's machine.
Absolutely. Hasmukh?
I'm not looking for work, but Stream Decks are readily available in South Africa.
Very good. What is the deal? Who's got all that juice in South Africa? Like they're always, they have plenty of Brios and plenty of 920s, plenty of Stream Decks. We run out of them here, and
no, that's because nobody uses them, so they've got such lousy virtual meetings.
But they nobody uses them, but somehow they all have them. Or you have enough supply. That's just the fascinating part of it. All right, next question.
Mm-hmm.
Jonas Datel of Reutling in Germany is in with, has someone tested the new web version of Zoom? Now even has a gallery for meetings.
Amazing. Sorry. No, I haven't tested it very much. I usually try to do everything I can to keep people from using the web version of Zoom. So I haven't tested it recently, but we should take a look at it. If it's got galleries, that's a big step forward. Next question.
JJ McKenna of Santa Venetia, California says, why does YouTube ask whether a content creator has included advertisements, and he put it in quotes, in a video?
Go ahead, Stuart.
So YouTube can get their cut.
Yeah. So, I mean, the issue is, I mean, Stuart's absolutely correct. YouTube, the deal that YouTube's made with creators is we will give you a free place to put your videos. We will give you a free place to stream your videos. That costs, like, especially for those of us who actually buy bandwidth to do it. That's not trivial. I mean, it's trivial for them, but as a service, it saves you thousands and thousands of dollars. If you are doing live streaming on YouTube, you are saving, and you have a lot of viewers, you are saving thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. There's a few of us that are old enough to remember that I used to do all of our tutorials in Flash because I couldn't afford the bandwidth. And so the negotiation is, I will give you all this free server space and time, and I will advertise on it, and you won't. Like, that is the deal. So creators get a little bit I'm afraid the creators get a little self-righteous when they say that, oh, I should just be able to do whatever I want. I mean, they are getting something for free, and nothing comes for free. What comes for free is we give you a place to put it, but we get to run the ads, not you. And that's you can run your own promotional things, and that's fine, but running other people's ads and getting paid for it is something that is outside of the terms of service, because that's how they pay for us being able to throw videos up and live stream to it. It's something that would cost us a lot of money, at least $1,000 a year with live stream to do it. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
There was one point where YouTube was working or trying out the idea that if that was checked, that wouldn't put ads against it. But the other thing is, with that checked, it also alerts YouTube that there is some sort of sponsorship to it, so they can look at it and not give a cross ad. So if you're promoting product A, they don't put product B's ads into its place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's go ahead, Guy.
I'm just laughing because back in 2005, 2006, I remember my boss going, hey, we're on the front page of Apple because your video podcast, and our server provider just said we're at $2,000 right now for fees. You're going to have to pull your videos down or re-encode them to a smaller resolution because we're already way over our limit. And so it's funny now that people just put stuff up on YouTube with no worry about it. It's just like, oh, get 1 million views. Cool. Like, no worries about
we had a moment where we put up a video podcast on Libsyn, and I remember someone at Libsyn called me the next day and just apologized and said we had to take your video down because you were burning up the servers, like it was like, like it was just, like we were, like they were like, we were moving a gig a second and we just couldn't, like, we can't afford to do that very often, and it was the hi-fi, it was the Apple hi-fi of all things, the Apple hi-fi video that Leo and I shot. It was just not, but it just happened to be, we did it right at the right time and we put it out and it was right after the thing and, we rushed it through and suddenly there was a lot of views. I mean, it's a pretty amazing thing. I mean, I've had trouble where we wanted to run ads on stuff that we put on YouTube, but, and it's been a problem, and copyright's a problem and all these other problems, but it's pretty magical that we can just throw videos up and have millions of people watch them and we don't have to pay for it. Like we should not underestimate the value of that. Next question.
Rodney Dyer of Richmond, Virginia says, is there a persistent list to timestamp topics across all episodes outside of the individual YouTube descriptions? And I think he's talking about office hours on our shows. There's a professor wanting to catch up on the education stuff before asking questions. And so kind of Discord, but.
Well, two things is almost all of our education conversations are on Saturday mornings. So you really only have to look at those ones. There's only going to be 20 or 30 to look at since we started that specialty. So we have a couple of them here and there, but we are moving towards the idea that sometime this year you'll be able to search everything from the time we turn it on. It won't be the old stuff, but everything from the time we turn it on, it'll keep track of. The other thing is that we don't mind people asking the same question twice, even 2 days in a row. It's a different panel. It's a different group. It'll be a different answer. So it's really more about the discussion than the actual answer. And sometimes we were talking, Jesse asked a question. I said, just ask that tomorrow, because you'll get a better answer. So in the same way, don't be afraid. I mean, no one should be concerned about asking a question twice. It's the way this panel works. It won't be, because it's not one person. You're not asking the teacher the same question that they were asked yesterday. You're asking a new group of people the same thing. You could ask the same question every day and you get a slightly different answer. Now we would start to shorten it, because what will happen is we as a group will slowly organize around an answer, and then it'll get faster and faster and we'll oftentimes get better but don't do that too much. Like if everybody asks the same question, we get like 10 of the same questions every day, I'll fire you all. All right, go ahead, Bill.
Well, I was just going to say, yeah, about the fifth time I answer a particular question, I start being able to get it right and efficient.
Right.
It takes about four bad ones.
When we feel like, yeah, exactly. We need a little practice to answer the question. When we say we just talked about that yesterday or 2 days ago, that also is a good reference for you to go, hey, there's probably a relatively detailed answer of this, and we're going to answer it a little faster today. But there's no problem. I wouldn't bother. Like I didn't even bother to record them for a while because I was like, it doesn't matter. It's all the moment. But everyone persuaded me to record them. So, but don't worry about it. Next question.
Keenan Campbell of Princeton, Illinois says, with all of these hands-on projects, I think a specific second or third hour called Office Hours Labs would be a cool idea.
Well, that's what we're moving towards on Saturday. The real question I have for everybody at some point is how much is too much, because I think that there's a lot of, within our group, there's a little bit of FOMO that goes on when we start doing stuff. And so, I mean, there was a discussion this weekend. The Raspberry Pi thing was so exciting that there was a discussion of like, hey, we could do something from 10 to noon and from noon to 2 and 2 to 4 and 4 to 6. We could cover all kinds of different things. And it was a serious discussion, and we may get to that, but we have to make sure that I just want to make sure that we don't burn people out. Like people just decide that because people won't want to miss it, because the problem is that there is a value to being there. You can watch the recording later, but there's something very different about the energy and the ability to interact with everybody that's different about doing it live. And so that's what I'm conscious to, but definitely Saturday afternoons are going to become some version of Office Hour Labs. It's a great name. No, next question.
Alex Forty Goldner, our friend from London, England, says Signet has acquired less pain software, makers of Kino. Any comments about that? And he has a link to the announcement.
I haven't used Kino. I know of it, but I don't have enough knowledge about it to really dive into an answer. Next question.
Nick Addison of Toronto says, what are your best suggestions for a software option on Mac OS to route or encode stereo audio from an application like Zoom over NDI to be ingested by OBS on another local networked Mac, I guess. I make use of Loopback already, but I don't believe it has NDI functionality. Thanks.
Go ahead, Jason.
I'm going to reject the premise of the question. If you're going between two separate networks, generally NDI does not play nice there. Yes, there are ways to do it, but I would try to avoid that if possible. You can actually use in loopback the send and receive that is part of Mac OS, and someone's going to remember what it's called, but I believe it's just a straight up low latency encode and send. And then on the other side, you can get a receive. I can look up the name if it doesn't come up.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I believe that's built into audio hijack, not loopback, and it's called like AU net send and AU net
Yes,
receive.
thank you.
Yes. But yeah, this is a perfect use case for Dante.
Yeah, well, except for the going across the network, or I guess on OBS, another local network on the Mac. So it might be Unity Connect, or because Dante won't go across the networks, right?
You may mean another Mac on the same network is the way that is phrased.
Oh, another local, local. Yeah, so if it's local network, Dante would be the right thing. Yeah, absolutely. And the only thing I'll say is 2 Macs on Dante without some piece of hardware, without the hardware chip, without the Dante chip somewhere in your network, it's a little wonky, in my opinion.
A clock source.
Yeah.
So you need something with a chip, and you can technically do it with Dante Via, but
I would like having some little audinate one of the AVIO like a XLR or a whatever on the network cleans everything up really fast. As far as how it works. Next question.
Paul Wallace of Austin, Texas is in with, could you demo with your iPhone, how to do a LiDAR scan?
I don't know if I can do that quickly.
Alex,
we're going to do it
a lot easier with the new phones that have LiDAR in them. I mean, I remember waving my phone around, always trying to get it calibrated.
Yeah, no, it is getting there, I guess is what I would say. Is that the problem is that that's still, from my perspective, a pretty low poly solution. And which app is that? Is that? I don't even know who I'm looking at here.
That's Guy.
Oh, Guy.
And when it maps each button on the extreme.
There's Polycam. Sorry, it's hard to hold the camera and do this at the same time. This is the big old iPad, but yeah, this is Polycam. And so if I hit done, let's see what it looks like. Oh, that wasn't much at all.
Yeah, I think that Polycam has kind of proven to be one of the easier ones. I would say I'm not ready to show it that much because I don't think it does a very good job. It's doing okay. With texture maps, it looks so much better than when you actually look at the geometry. So it's but it's getting there. But most of the folks that I know in engineering areas are leaning towards Polycam at the moment. Next question. We're going to do a second hour, by the way. I'm working on getting Fred Fikert in. That'll be kind of a mind twisting hour while Fred tries to explain it to you in terms we can all follow about how LiDAR works. Next question.
Michael Fisk in Spokane Valley says, my Ethernet connected M1 Mac Mini is dropping the signal sporadically. I know it's not the router. All my other devices remain connected. It generally was 5 to 10, then came back up. Yesterday, I had to reboot in order to get it connected. Help.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
I don't think this has anything at all to do with the fact that it's an M1 Mac Mini. The network is extremely stable. The network stack, because it's directly hardware addressable. That's a long way of saying it's undoubtedly something like a bad routing table or an IP conflict. Something is basically interfering. So I highly doubt that it's anything other than that. Go into set service order, disable Wi-Fi. Make sure Ethernet is the only thing that is active. Disable everything else if you have to. If you still have issues, it's your routing table.
Go ahead, George, and then Stuart.
As Jason just mentioned,
you're echoing. George, you're echoing. You got some kind of horrible echo, so you're coming in twice. Go ahead, Stuart.
One thing that probably most of us forget to do is occasionally check the cables. Make sure that the cables are seated or that they've been pulled in and out a couple of times to clean the mating surface, so you get a good electrical connection between the cable and the device it's plugged into. I mean, it's just good practice, and sometimes it can fix issues.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, exactly what the steward said. Like go through a process of elimination, like try a different switch, a different port on the switch, a different cable. If you find that changing the cable works, I would actually, it takes, it's much quicker to just recrimp it than to manually just like clean it up.
Next question.
Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand says, I know Alex doesn't see ads on YouTube, but I use the free version. And I've noticed now that when I pause a video to get coffee or so forth and unpause it, now I get an ad. It's Apple TV's YouTube app. Is this a new feature?
Yeah, well, it's a new feature for YouTube. It might not be a new feature for you. The thing that YouTube's always trying to find is how do you insert a video ad with the least amount of pain for the user. And so if the calculation is that if you've stopped, you're probably, this is a good time. This is better than just interrupting in the middle of a sentence, or a middle of a scene. It's less disruptive to give you the ad then. And so I'm sure that that's the case here. Jason and then Jeffrey.
Yeah, I mean, this is absolutely a new feature for Google's revenue. It is not in your best interest. There are many ways to block this, but all of them require advanced networking knowledge. None of them will work forever, and even fewer than that will work persistently on the Apple TV. So under that scenario, use AirPlay or pay them.
You can just pay them and then it goes away. You go, Jeffrey.
And the other thing to know is that you're coming from New Zealand, so it's a different country, different rules, different setup. They're doing ads slightly different than in the United States. So if you can VPN in the United States and see if that happens there, that might give you an indication.
But yeah, I'm pretty certain that they're doing it. They're going to do it. If they haven't done it everywhere yet, they're going to, because it's a super efficient way to serve up ads. Next question.
Unless New Zealand's in a test market.
Oh,
New Zealand is a test market.
Michael Fisk of Spokane Valley, Washington says, what generates personal YouTube income? Hits, subscribers, or something else?
Jeffrey?
There's a lot to that algorithm, and it's about it's definitely about hits, but it doesn't always have to be about every single video. I have videos that have like 5 hits to it, but then I have videos, when I had my Bell's palsy back in 2016, that video still gets a lot of hits because people get Bell's palsy every single day and they're looking for answers. So it's all about how many people come to a video, how long they watch the video, and if you've got ranking videos, if you've got a video that's doing really well, you want to keep promoting that so it brings up more, and you can
and then you're basically getting you are getting a cut of the YouTube ads, right? I mean, so YouTube's running ads in there, and if you haven't done something to demonetize it, you are getting a little bit of that. I don't know what the current numbers are.
60-40.
60-40. That's great. So 60-40 in your favor or in YouTube's favor?
60-40 in your favor. The last time I checked.
So yeah. So when those ads are coming up, you're making money. So that's, so obviously the more, the higher number of views, but that's why when you get a strike, like I don't care, because all I work on is PR style videos. And so I don't care if I get strikes not strikes. I don't care if I get copyright flags, because it doesn't affect anything, because I'm not trying to make money off of it. But for the folks that do get those, it becomes a big deal because they can't make money on what they're trying to make money on. So go ahead, Mickey.
And yeah, I think like a huge portion of bigger YouTubers' income doesn't come from YouTube itself, but through sponsorship deals.
Yeah, and what happens is that a lot of it, this is kind of the dark art of YouTube of YouTube influencers, is with FEC or with the FTC, they have to, or SEC, they have to, if they say, look at this thing and they have to say that I got, technically they're supposed to say this was given to me. And so I'm showing it to you, and they brought it in, or they, delivered it to me or whatever. And they sometimes do that in the story. They just show someone, delivering something or bringing it to them or stuff. They don't imply that they bought it. Where it gets murkier is like the clothing that they wear. Like, do they have to tell you that clothing was sent to them, or they're being paid to wear that clothing? And definitely on TikTok, that's a big business. So when you have basically in the millions of followers, 2, 3, 4, 5 million, it starts to, you by yourself isn't useful, but if a clothing manufacturer has 30 TikTokers, for instance, wearing the same type of clothes, it makes a difference, like, because it changes behavior. And because, and so and then they get packaged up by companies that sell them as a group, as opposed to selling them as they're packagers, essentially. Jeffrey and then Courtney. And we'll jump
Yeah,
in.
that's what I was alluding to in a previous question, because YouTube a couple of years ago was saying if you're making $25,000 on a video through a sponsorship, they want their cut, and they kind of relaxed on that. But if you're definitely making more than a couple $100 a month on sponsorships, you better be classifying it. And I did look it up; it's actually 55-45. 45 is YouTube's cut out of that.
Right. You good, Courtney?
Yeah, I have to leave for the second hour. I just wanted to remind people speaking of TikTok, that the SMPTE Hollywood meeting tonight, online meeting, is about TikTok and SMPTE. So,
interesting.
And with that, I bid you adieu.
That's a fascinating subject for SMPTE. I might try to dive into that. All right. Okay. We have one more real quick question. We'll just handle it, and then we'll move over to digital.
Yeah, we had a late entry. Stuart Wally just popped in with any suggestions for entry-level microphones for streaming events, and he's looking at things below $150 and below $300 as price points.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mickey.
Depends on exactly what you're capturing, but if it's just speech, like something like this, sure, MV7. PR40,
even an SM58. Like, there's all kinds of options. You just have to figure out is it a direct address? Does it need to be out of the frame? Is it in a room? There's a lot of, as Mickey would say, it depends.
It depends.
Yeah. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about getting ready for digital events. And one of the things I thought that it would be useful to define it, at least the way I'm defining these to clients, and then Brant and other folks can say if they define it differently. But when I'm talking to clients, I've really started to stratify the 3 different groups of events. So, 4 really. There's in-person, that's just in-person. There's hybrid. That means that there is a person on, talking to a group of people that are in the room, and then other people watching online. So I'm defining that as a hybrid event. So if there's a live audience for the speaker, as well as an online audience, that's a hybrid. A online event is that there is no group audience anywhere. Everybody's watching online. Everybody is online. They're watching at home. The speakers are by themselves. They could be in a studio, but they could be in a studio or by themselves, but they're not. There is no audience anywhere for the speaker. And then a digital first event is what I've been defining for clients as there is no audience for the speakers, but there could be audiences. So those are audiences. So and why that's important, and why we want to think about that today a little bit, is when we think about, I think that the digital first events are going to be some of the biggest events that we see coming forward. And that is, but the key is hybrid events will be what we do first. Online events, there'll be lots and lots of online events because they're easy to do. The pure physical events, I think, are going to slowly fade away. Like we'll still have them, and they'll be really high end and they'll be exclusive. But like the idea of not streaming what you're doing ever is not going to be something it's going to be niche, to do something that doesn't have any streaming component at all, for the mainstream. It doesn't mean it won't happen. There'll be thousands of them and everything else, because people like to have that exclusive experience. But there'll be some kind of streaming component, which would make it a hybrid event. The digital first event, though, the power of that is when you don't have an audience for the speakers, they're always if they're in a studio or at home, it means that their focus is much more on the audience. So the focus is now, I will argue over and over, as someone who's done tons and tons of both 15,000, 70,000 people in the room, down to 15, down to 1. Once you add one person into the audience, it changes the way the speaker interacts. A human being looks at another human being. It interacts with another human being, and it puts everybody on the outside. Like you are no longer part of the experience as soon as someone comes into the room. And we're working on an event for this summer where we might even be able to bring the 5 people in, and we want to put them in their own little boxes. Like we don't even want to have them in the same room talking to each other, because we want them to direct address the way we're doing it in Zoom, except we want to put them over fiber, we just want to connect them to each other in the building, having them talk to each other. Nice clean videos. And you'll see that, by the way, if that sounds crazy, watch the Sunday morning news. And I can tell you for a fact, because I've sat in those studios, that a lot of times when they're throwing to somebody talking and they're doing a direct address, that person is on the other side of the studio. Like, so they're literally talking to a person who's in the studio with them, but not over the table, because that's not the format that they set up. And so I think that it's important for us to think about that process. And if you have questions about it and about digital first events in general, go ahead and throw them in. But I think it's really important for us to think about that process, because the power of that means that the quality of the event goes way up. It's much more, digital first event has the audio is better, the video is better, it's more designed, and it doesn't take away what everyone keeps on talking about that they want back. They want the movie. They want to go be able to hang out with their friends. They want to have dinners. They want to have appetizers. They want to have the hallway conversations. They want to have the swag. They want to have all of those things still happen. It's the only thing that you're changing is taking the speaker out of the room and putting a big LED wall up, that speaker. And what's powerful about that, and why I think that it's going to continue to become a bigger thing, is because that means that room and the room next to it and the city next to it and the country next to it all get the same experience. They all have this a person talking to them, or person, really addressing them. And I think that, or a person watching on their phone, or with, 5 coworkers or whatever, all of that stuff is a direct piece. Now, the challenge with all of that is that interactive piece. Like, how do you ask questions? How do you, communicate? How do you organize that? So I thought that it would be interesting to have a second hour. We had talked about digital first events a couple of weeks ago, but talking about coming back to digital first events and discussing that, and me seeing what you guys think of it, because this is how I've started to talk to a lot of clients about it, is separating out, and not saying that we can't do any of those things. The all physical event is still going to be a viable format for some things. I've worked in events where especially, if you're an the ad sales at some of these big companies, that sell ads online, stunning. Like, it is like the amount of money spent per head is just unbelievable. Like, it's just this gorgeous experience, and so I think that that's still going to happen, because those aren't the kind of conversations they want to have online. Those are handshakes and sitting around and having a couple, so that's still going to happen. Online events, that's what we're doing here, is very efficient. And then the hybrid events, I think, are going to be the thing that people will do because they don't know any better. like hybrid events are something that they eventually realize that the digital first event is more effective. And I'm speaking as someone who's done at least 1,000 hybrid events. It's not like I'm saying that, I don't think that those will be popular and I never did them. It's just that I just know that if any of us watched these events, you always know you're on the outside. You're a fly on the wall. You're in the kiddie table, all the ways you want to talk about it. You're not part of the event. So one of the challenges is figuring out, how do you make sure that the audience, I think that's the biggest challenge as we talk about how to organize and plan a digital first event, is how do we organize and make sure that the online audience feels like they're part of it. And one of the ways that we do that here is Mukana, being able to have people able to chat, ask questions, and most importantly, in that format, whether you use Mukana or Slido or whatever, the thing that makes a difference there is separating. And I'm just going to keep talking until people raise their hand, or until we go to questions. I'm just letting you know. I'm just riffing here. But the thing that makes a difference there is that we separated the questions from the chat. Like, that is the magic, and that's why Facebook and Twitter and Twitch and all these other ones are really hard. And that's why everyone talks about low latency video, is because it's just a mess, because you have the questions and you have the comments in one column, and that is a disaster, for a digital first event. Go ahead, Bill, and then Brant.
I just think it's interesting. I've been thinking about this lately, because really broadcasting started out originally as a direct. There was no audience. I mean, they literally had the TV cameras in there and they put on a news program or something like that. Then very early on, they started to do these kind of live-ish events, but it was still an orchestra and Artura Tuscanini broadcasting to everybody, right. No audience. Eventually the talk show came in and they started to incorporate a live audience there, and things started to change a little. But even if you look in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and the early 90s, those talk shows, they were designed for the broadcast camera. If you went to the Tonight Show, yes, there was an audience, and yes, they applauded, but it was designed for that much larger audience at home watching on television.
I mean, I went to the David Letterman show. I couldn't see David Letterman from where I was sitting.
Exactly.
Like, you know, there was all kinds of stuff in front of him, and
so
cameras
really
and everything else.
Analog first was the original thing before we even got to digital first. And now we have these hybrids, and it's been possible to do something. And I think this maybe comes from theater, where that was the audience is all that matters. And as you brought cameras into that, it was a big tension about you can't put a camera there because it's going to block the audience, and that's what we're here for. And now we're still in this same battle of tension between what's the right way to present this material to get the in-person energy of live theater, but still make it a broadcast first event. It's hard.
And one of the things I get a lot is, well, the speaker really needs to have people in the room. I'm like, well, talk to actors about going from a theater to film. When they're in film, it's even harder because you have actors that are able to emote. It's just a different class of speaker, you know, like that is going to understand how to be something when they don't have that in-person feedback. Because now I do think the feedback's important. I could not do the show without all of you in front of me. Like that is the nods, the impact, the people looking at things, whatever they're doing, definitely is impactful. So I'm definitely not saying that someone should just talk into the void. And I've done that too. I mean, the precursor to office hours was called Ask Alex, where people I would literally open up Hangouts with chat and just be answering questions, and it was fine. I mean, it was an interesting way of doing it, but it's much better now. You know, and so I do admit that there is an advantage to that, but the idea that you actually have to have people in the room, I think is something that is a crutch, you know, that speakers hang on to because that's their past. Go ahead, Brant.
There's a lot to unpack in that opening segment. I hope we can come back to the hybrid.
We got time. We don't have a lot of questions, and we still got 43 minutes.
So definitely want to come back to the hybrid discussion. But for me, defining how I've defined this stuff has always been based on a spectrum, based on the type and number of audiences. So kind of starting on one side, you've got your fully in-person event with just one audience that you have to plan for, and then you sneak your way kind of in, and you've got broadcast where you've got an in-person audience or not, and then an external audience that you're having to plan for. And then somewhere in the middle is hybrid, and you're trying to, you know, work both of those audiences equally. And for me, the magic, and we can come back to this, is in the connection, trying to create connections between those two audiences. And I know you disagree on some of that. And then as you move further over, you wind up with fully online events, and you've kind of come wrapped back around to a single audience. And so for me, that kind of helps label, you know, what we're talking about here in terms of the different types of audiences that you might have.
Well, and my thing is I definitely agree with you that we need to tie the audiences all together. So again, one of the things that the reason that there's a mobile version of Mukana, for instance, as an example, is so that people who are in an audience can, like sitting in an audience, could still interact with the online audience. So you can tie everybody together. So everybody, you could have, you know, 3,000 people in 8 different locations that are all in theaters, and they'd all be in the same conversation online, you know, and they don't have to have a screen. That's the big thing, is we're not streaming something. They're just looking at the comments and the questions and everything else. And they're in the same conversation as you have with, you know, folks that are just watching at home on their phone, you know, or on their Apple TV. And so the idea is I do agree with you that building that unified, that is one of the challenges that we have to build, is how do we create a unified experience between everybody's, you know, everybody watching it should feel like they're all part of one group. That's what I feel like we get here in a lot of ways, where, you know, we don't have a bunch of extra rooms. Now we do that in the pre-show and the post-show. When I remember to turn on the extra rooms. Last couple of days I haven't. But in general, you have the ability to have everybody in that, but it is a challenge to figure out how are we going to tie it together. Now, one thing that we get back and forth that comes up with digital first events is, how do people ask questions? You know, like they used to be able to walk up to a mic, and there's a reason that we're using text questions. It's much faster. Like people will talk about the magic of having someone ask this incredibly heart-wrenching question or this but that's like 1 out of 100. Like we just want to make sure we're all clear. If anybody who's sat through corporate events with mics in the room, it is a lot of dirt that you're digging through for that diamond, and it may or may not be worth it. We started doing Q&A with a large government organization, and within a year, this is a decade ago, within a year, they stopped putting mics in the room. They said you have to use a text system to ask the questions because it was so much more efficient. Go ahead, Bill.
I'm just wondering if it's more a matter of the producer's focus. And my question would be, are you monofocused, no matter which audience you're focused on? If you're monofocused on either it's going to be the online audience or it's going to be the broadcast audience or whatever, or have you elected to distribute your focus so that you're going to try to accommodate more than one target group? And you have to realize it's kind of logarithmic. It takes much more effort.
I don't know. I mean, focus. I guess, again, when you get rid of the hybrid event and you go to a digital first event and you build ways that they can see the audiences that are in theaters, they can see the audiences that are at home. It's one big, the thing is it's one merged audience. Like you're not, you're talking to all of them. You're answering those questions. You're interacting with all of them at the same time. For what you're doing, you don't need to change your gears on how you do that unless they're in the room. And
but don't you have to staff up to handle that much extra scale when you include bi-directional communication between a larger audience? Yeah.
Well, I very rarely, I would argue that there are times to have those conversations with folks, but you just, two-way conversations with the folks like in a conference room or whatever. But that's where it's actually easier to deal with people at home, because they can just turn on we're all equipped now to some degree to do that. It's actually easier. But to your point, and again, for event companies, for event producers, the good news behind a digital first event is you actually need more resources over time, because you're now dealing with, it's not that is less resources. You're talking about staffing. Anybody who does this, you're talking about individually staffing 20 or 30 or 40 locations around the world. And one of the big challenges as we think about that is comms. Is thinking about how to manage that. And you need, when you think about this, you're going to need, if you think about, you have your speaker here and you've got different locations, each one of these locations has to have a series of local loops that are just them managing what's going on there. But then they have to have a series of big loops that is tying everybody together so that everybody knows what's happening next. And that's one of the big challenges with that process. Let's jump to the questions.
All right. First one comes from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. I hit the wrong answer button. So I'm going to there. I need some examples of Zoom fails other than Lawyer Cat. For those of you who might have missed it, and I don't know if there are any people, that was the lawyer who went on to a court proceeding and had some Snapchat filter of a cat head imposed over him. To get stakeholder buy-in for practice sessions, he's looking for examples of that. Anyone have a playlist by any chance?
That's good. Ken and then Stuart.
Yeah, just simply go to YouTube and type in Zoom fails compilation, and you'll get literally hundreds. I mean, there are lists here with people who've done the top 100 of 2020. So that's the simplest way, and you can spend all day and find what you want.
On a more mundane thing, I mean, there's lots of ones that are really funny and really out there. One of the things that in the more basic form of things this is why comms are so important when we talk about challenges around digital first events, is that when something goes minorly wrong and you can't get a hold of the person except through Zoom, that's like this just super uncomfortable place to be, where there's no back channel. Back channels, this is one of the big things we have to tackle with digital first events, is those back channels. And a lot of us are using ClearCom or Unity or other things like that to feed them back in. But it's something that you have to pay a lot of attention to. Go ahead, Stuart, and then Guy.
I really want to go on a rant about this with my local council, but I'm going to put 3 links attached to Chris's question there. One is how my local council was doing their meetings about this time last year. with just laptops and windows in the background and whatever, all the things that we say not to do, they were doing. Then they put virtual backgrounds in that it looks more like a Go board than it does like a meeting. The little squares are that small on the screen. And they've now changed to new virtual backgrounds and gamer headsets. And as we all know, the microphones on the gamer headsets are a little poor in quality. So we're trying to give them the right pointers and push them in the right direction for a few of us who have been asking for the contract to do this for them, but they're not listening because they're stubborn.
Yep, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I'll put 3
Guy.
links in there.
That's great. Guy and then Chris.
Yeah, we had one yesterday that was normally a pretty big event that's normally in our local convention center, and it's normally attended by mayors and senators, and pretty big deal. And we usually do a video. Our company donates some video production just to help them out. It's a Nourishing Networks. It's a like food bank thing. And so when I went to the rehearsal the prior day, I was like, uh-oh, like these guys are in trouble. They got a guy that just kind of volunteered to do this. And I was like, this is a train wreck waiting to happen, but I wished them the best because it was too late for me to really get involved.
Yep.
And we let them use our 1080p account. And I mean, on the show day yesterday, this time, 7 a.m., I went over to the feed and the feed was black. So the ATEM Mini that they had failed. It overheated, or I think some of you guys have seen this black screen. And he didn't know to restart it. He didn't know just the solutions to unplug it and plug it back in. So they went to slides. So it's like 45 minutes of just slides. They went into like teacher mode. And then the video that we made carried through the show. This is like an 11-minute video that we were able to play. And at least there was 300 people in the meeting. So it was a big meeting. It was prestigious people. Yeah. And so we were able to kind of save it a little bit with our video. It carried the show. But man, talk about a fail that could have been handled with more rehearsal, more tech, so.
And one of the things that I will keep talking about is the power of doing it over and over again. Repetition. It trains the audience on how to do it. It trains the producers on how to do it. Everyone learns through that. And many small events, even if you're going to have a big event that's once a year or 6 months or whatever, having lots of ways that you engage your audience makes you build your pipeline. They build their understanding of how to do it, and it slowly builds up so that when you have a tentpole event, you're not starting everything from scratch. Go ahead, Chris, and then Chris Widner, then Chris Fenwick, then Brandt.
Yeah, the subtleties are what I was trying to get for, because you look at a lot of the fail compilations and they're the grandiose fails rather than the minor things that really make a difference in a meeting. So.
Yeah, I mean, the little things in difference. You saw me very quickly attack. I find virtual backgrounds to be incredibly frustrating. Like it just, I will admit that it's partially because I'm a compositor, or I used to be, and so all I can see is people's edges. Like when they turn it on, I just go bad edge, bad edge, bad edge, bad edge, bad edge. And I do believe that other people notice that too. They're just weird, and it's crawling around and it's doing stuff. And so that's one of the. And then the other thing is that we did a bunch of training for a large company. Building videos of how long will people listen to someone talk, and how long will they look at a slide. And what we found was you got about 6.5 minutes for someone just to talk straight to you, to do a presentation talking to you, put up a slide, and you got 60 to 90 seconds before they move your window to the one side of one corner of the desk and start doing something else. And now if you think about it, we do that all the time. And when I talk to clients about it, I just go, just watch what happens when you're in these meetings and someone puts up a slide. What do you do? And almost all of them realize that they check their email. Like that is I will now check. Like that was the number one thing people do when you put a slide up is they check their email. They move it over, they start, and they're not paying attention anymore. And what that does is it means that they're not engaging in you're killing off like all the engagement, the chat, everything else is all being destroyed by the fact that they're no longer in the meeting with you. Go ahead, Chris, and then Brandt.
You had mentioned repetition. If you had decided to do office hours once a week, it would have taken us 52 years to get to the point where we are today in terms of experience. And also, edges, yesterday, St. Patrick's Day, Doug Ferguson turned his green screen off, and immediately I thought, what happened to the fence? What happened to the fence that you have behind you? Number 3, if you're interested, go to Snap Camera and search for Lawyer Cat. It's a very popular filter.
Go ahead, Brant.
Yeah, real quick, Alex. By the way, if you've got that eye tracking data, I would love to. If that's published,
it's
anywhere,
internal.
It's
okay. We didn't publish it. It was an internal thing. We're looking at redoing it again to update it so that we can publish it and put it out. It was not something that we could. It was anyway. So, but we're looking at doing it again, getting some Tobies. The hard part is getting everyone together. We used to be able to do that because we were putting in people into computers, but beyond the data, what we can usually tell people is just look at how you interact with a meeting. Pay attention to how you're interacting. When people put up stills and leave them up, what do? You don't stay staring at the still. You go off and do something else. Go ahead, Brant.
Yeah, real quick before, this is one I use in some of my classes because it's got about 8 different good things in it. You got the guy with his sunlight coming in on his head. You've got the microphone at the navel so that it's so far away it can't be heard. And then my favorite down here is the dirty laundry that's in the back corner that's stacked up on the bed. So
that's great. Go ahead, Doug.
Some of our real life fails in our digital meetings has been moving people around, especially breakouts, because we do mainly webinars where it's, several to many, just like what this is. And then having to create meetings as the breakout and then sending people, out of one system into another and then try to get them back. And that has been a very challenging part. And it's hard to practice that, because when you can't get all the attendees in and hey, guess what? We're going to practice going to breakouts. And here's, that mess. And then a point to the comms, it's a struggle because when we try to get people on comms that have just installed Zoom for the very first time, it's no, we're not going to do that. When you see your face, just start talking.
but what we do is because we inserted on the Zoom side, this is the advantage of doing point-to-point connections with everybody is that they don't have to do anything. They just get Zoom and suddenly they hear us talking to them. The only thing we ask them to do is put a headphone in because we're afraid you'll hear us back. And even then, it doesn't really matter. I mean, because the echo cancellation will work because it's just coming through Zoom. So the advantage of doing, when we go back to this idea of digital first events, having a point-to-point connection with the person on the other side where they don't have to, is why we use Zoom in front of a lot of other things, is because, or any of those, that point-to-point connection is part of what makes it work, is that I can talk to them. And sometimes we only do the point-to-point with the host because no one, we can't afford, they don't want to put a whole system in. But being able to have that doesn't mean they don't have to learn anything new. Hasmukh? And then,
when I watch telly and I see all our politicians with virtual backgrounds, my instinct is to get up, take my iPhone, and I take a snapshot. And I build this portfolio of stuff. So about 3-4 weeks ago, one of the politicians I know very well is high up in the cabinet, and he was being interviewed. And I sent him a text message and, this is a clean show, so I must be careful what I say. I said, you look like whatever. And I didn't hear from him for a day. And the next day, 2 days later, he called me. He says, what do you mean I look like? And I explained to him. He says, what I'm going to do, I'm going to get some of my colleagues into a meeting with you. And you tell me exactly what you said to me in front of all of them. So he got about half the cabinet, which is about 16 or 18 people in this meeting. And initially, I couldn't sleep the night before, but then I plucked up the courage the next day. And so he said, he was the Minister of Finance, and he says, look, you need to understand Hasmukh. He's going to tell you just like it is, so bear with him. And all I did is I put all their stuff on the screen, and they just looked at it. And at the end of it, I said, do you have any questions? And the Minister of Finance said, now do you know what Hasmukh means? You all look like. So that was a great meeting.
The funny thing is that I think South Africa is going to get to the point where it is the best virtual event country in the world, and it's all going to be Hasmukh's fault. He's slowly wearing everybody down. Go ahead, Angela, and then Jason. We'll move on to the next question.
I know our biggest fail is how no matter how many technical checks, no matter what we do, there is a blockage on some people on hardwiring. And it's like, no matter what you say, oh, I've got mesh, I've got this, I'm going to tell everybody to turn off everything. And then show day comes and it's like, oh, I have my kid teaching somebody in the other room. And it's like, no matter what you can do, it's still like, there is that gap between what we can do and what the person can deliver.
Yeah, and we're super pushy. Like, I have to admit that we are like probably almost over. Like, yeah, like we're really pushy. We're like, we send them we'll just go, what's your address, and we'll mail them a 75 from Monoprice. We'll drop ship a 75-foot Ethernet cable, and just go, do you know where it is, and can you find it? Is there an open gap? Okay, we'll send you a cable, and we just say that it's it's just and I do think we talked about this earlier. I do want to do a video where we just talk about all the problems people have. We do a video of what they look like on Zoom if they were all in the same. Yeah, there you go. It's great. Go ahead, Jason, and then we'll move on.
Hasmukh, that story was absolutely excellent. And for those of you who are like, how am I going to make money doing this? I'd say that's a pretty good start. Angela, yes, that is far and away all the events that I've done. That is the largest point of pushback. And I've gotten into the habit of drop shipping an Ethernet cable. But if I get even a little bit of pushback, part of my setup and my pre-check involves just shipping out Ethernet over AC and, teaching them how to set it in, how to connect the two. That way, anywhere in the house, it's pretty much going to work. I've found that it almost always is better than Wi-Fi.
Jeff Francis's video, I don't know if you've seen it or not, is pretty good at illustrating. I think it's actually me, because I was on Wi-Fi at the beginning of his shows at some point, but of showing what happens with Wi-Fi when it breaks up, and I think that, we always come back to it's just how important you want to be on the show. Like when people don't want to use our kits, we're like, well, everybody else has a kit. So we just want to make sure that you look your best, and you can, you look as good as everyone else will. There's a little bit of peer pressure. We use the little, the cops in the like, we're going to go over and talk to Francis over here. And if Francis has a different story, or if he breaks down first, you're going to jail, and so, yeah, good. So we're just like, hey, everybody else is going to look really good and sound really good. And we just want to make sure that you're up to the same level that they are. Next question
is from Charles Klein in New York City. I hope I got this one right. Alex, what is your process for testing streams for audio sync, color resolution, and so forth? How much time do you allocate for testing, and how far ahead of the event should this testing occur?
In general, we're testing all the time. We're testing, how we do the process and what we're doing probably almost every day. There's some version of a test going out. We're testing color, we're testing resolution, we're figuring out better ways to do sync, better ways to do color correction, better ways to, so that's happening a lot. For an event, it doesn't really matter until we're set up, for that event, because, whether it's coming out of a location or coming out, everything's changing all the time. So usually our last look at color and sync is the day before, when everything's been set up. And then, we look at it, and then we usually try to do another sync test in the morning just to have us feel better. And so, but, a lot of it happens on the last day, because doing it before then stops a crew, from setting up, and until it's in its final state, it doesn't matter, because you test it, and then someone adds another video thing, and now it's out of sync. Someone adds something else. And so you want to get to a point. Now, we try to, as best we can, not change anything 24 hours before the event in hardware. Like nothing gets added, subtracted, et cetera, so that we can stabilize the system. Go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, and I think it ties back to the last question too. We'll test prior to an event up to a month before, just so we get an assessment on what they have, if they need anything, if we want to send them Ethernet. And then, try to get them in the same location, same time of day, all that stuff, just so they kind of get in that routine for when we want them to log in on show day.
And if you're bringing in individuals over the, from their homes, same time of day turns out to be super important. Like, same time of day is the thing, because it's sunlight. It's that sunlight thing of going across there. The sunlight shows up in some other way, or they lose light. Like, you don't realize that all their lighting was you have a 7 o'clock show at night and your test was at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and all the light in the room is all sun. Like there's no light and suddenly you realize they're in shadow. We've definitely had that problem. And then also internet usage. So in some countries, especially, you end up with at 4:30, it turns out 4:30 in the afternoon is really not a good time to do a stream, if they're coming in, because it's just, there's so much usage going on at that time. Lunch is not a good time either to do it. Those are two times where we see a lot of congestion in a lot of systems. So you want to, the time of day is important. And for individuals, we try to test them a week in advance, at least, week to 2 weeks in advance. And that gets back to Daniel's point where we make a list of, we need to send something extra, or this is broken, or that doesn't work. And we have time, to test it. The thing that scares us is, you're not going to see them until the day of the event. Like we're going to do a rehearsal in the morning. We're always like, oh, that's going to hurt. Daniel?
And like you said, getting them familiar with it too. So if you're bringing them into a vMix and giving them a return that looks like this, might be different than, everything else they've done in the past. So getting them kind of acquainted and familiar before
Also,
they're, on air.
You can't be ruthless with them on the day of the event because it'll put them in their head. So when you're dealing with people coming in, like when someone has a problem, like we'll have things like we talk about when to pull the knife out or if we should pull the knife out, because someone will have some technical problem and we have to decide, like, is it going to be worse with it in or out? Like if I stop the show or right before the show, tell them something's wrong that they can't fix, you just leave it there. Like we just, and so we make those decisions all the time of, you leave it, just leave we just call it leaving the knife in, because it's just like, don't pull it out because you don't know what's going to happen, And so we had someone who had this was a recent show, not recent, last year. They had their slightly, tilted camera. And right before the show, like 10 minutes before, I said, hey, can you just straighten out that camera? Well, that camera was like taped onto something or whatever. And when they hit it, it just went blah like this. There was no, like, we're going live in 10 minutes and they're trying to get it all back up. And then they kind of get it back up. But the problem is now in their mind, one of the things that we try to do as best we can is have everyone in an online event or a digital first event be settled. So we want to be ready at 10 minutes and have them just chit chatting and talking, and they're kind of looking at it and they see a countdown clock. So the countdown clock is really super important to me because it syncs everybody up. I don't need to count you in to an event, because as a host, we just practice you watching the countdown clock go to 0 and then you start talking. For the audience, they have an agreement they know when it's going to happen. They're less likely to leave. But it also has this calming effect where everyone just knows when the thing's going to happen. We're all ready. There's 8 minutes and 35 seconds left, and they're just kind of chit-chatting and everything else. And then, we give them little reminders, and then we start intensifying it, like 90 seconds out, 60 seconds out, 15 seconds out, then we go 10, 9, 8, so we'll do that over audio. Last 3 seconds, we don't say anything. Anyway, but the point is that it creates a pattern, and it creates something that has them, creating things, whether it's creating patterns makes people calm. And so getting them used to patterns, whether they're walking on stage in a main event or whether they're doing it from their house, creating a pattern that they're used to and creating something that they have certainty that there's nothing like, oh, now I'm on. You want to avoid all of those things as you start to build these. And digital events, it becomes more important because you're not there. They may be, you have to figure out ways that you create that certainty remotely. Let's go to the next question.
And it comes from Roscoe Jones. In film, single camera style, we set a goal for the director to put the audience in the best seat in the house at every moment. How is this implemented in a digital first event?
It's actually much easier. I mean, one thing you might notice when you looked at the Grammys is that the camera shots, even though that was a hybrid event, camera shots were a lot better because you don't have so many people. So, one of the things that you can do is when I don't have to worry about people, I can put those screens right where I need them for the, so when this gets into the hybrid versus digital first. And in digital first, I have big screens in front of my hosts, that they can see if they're coming into a studio, they can see everybody they need to see. I've got feedback to them. I've got notes. I've got all these other things that can be right in front of them, instead of them having to look down at a downstream monitor and them having to look over to to some kind of DSM that's way on the other side of the room. All those things go away because I can have all that information, fed to them. I can also grab multiple cameras, so if I, want to show somebody something, I can very quickly actually do that, and so I think that those are the things that I was going to try to show you something while I was talking, but then I tangled up my cables. So it won't work right now. Anyway, but the idea of being able to, like, for instance, having multicam, typically, I just turned a bunch of things off because I didn't expect to talk about it. But with a lot of these things, if I want to get up and show you something, so, for me right now, I can go, okay, well, I want to show you, this will get kind of complicated, but I want to show you something here, and I can, go in and show you something that I want. And then I can also, for instance, if we start incorporating stuff, now this will be a little weird, but I can circle things, and I can talk about those. And so having these annotation tools, having the ability to jump to multiple cameras, having, those kinds of things all set up, gives the speaker a lot more than what they had before. They have, they were kind of crippled before. And when you get used to, like, the reason that I don't show up at physical events anymore, and I won't, is because my system here in my house, I can communicate more effectively and faster than I can on stage. Like, it's not, it's not even close at this point, of what can be done on stage versus I could never touch that on stage. And so that's where you start building these studios up. You can actually have a better relationship or a better way to talk about it. And we saw this at the Raspberry Pi thing on Saturday. When everybody has that, it gets super interesting, super fast. Next question.
Comes to Alex. If you are for virtual events, and this is from 1F Jeff Keithley in Texas, how can you not be in favor of a virtual world scenario? Or is it just a virtual trade show copy you don't like?
So I was, I've been tracking this since Second Life came out, and so it's not that I don't think that we'll eventually get somewhere. I think that the issue is that I think that avatars are dehumanizing. I think that there's so much information that we get from face-to-face contact that I just feel like they're cold because we don't see people's faces, and we don't see, we don't like we're the infamous Stanford study where and in one of those studies, they're talking about people's eye contact with avatars, like how often that they looked at the avatar. And I was like, people don't look at other people the same way, depending on how they interact and whether they nod. Like, if you nod to someone a lot, they'll talk more. And if you go like this for someone, they'll talk less. Like, all of those things, millimeters, like a sub-millimeter movements on your face engage people in different ways. And so the thing is that the idea, and so the problem I have right now is that it's goofy to have people, little 3D models running around doing all those things. And then, and I love them. I love facial motion capture. And I think that a lot of those things are really fun. But even if you take something that is pretty good, I mean, look at ILM taking Princess Leia. That's millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars and weeks or months of time to do that. And it still didn't look right. And so we're not going to be able to do that at our house anytime soon. And so the thing is that, but all that communication matters, that all those little flutters and where we put our eyes and how we look, that connects us to each other. And so my complaint about the virtual meetings is that the virtual things is just that it's just weird, and it does give you that sense of disconnectedness, that you feel like you're with a bunch of people, but you're all alone, and I think that what makes this work for us is the fact that we see each other. And it's also why I don't like I want to see people's houses. I want to see what they're doing. I want to see, that it's something about it that connects us. Go ahead, Angela.
That uncanny valley feeling. It's just like not quite reality, and it just makes you feel uneasy.
And it just, and I think that it's not connecting you to other people. And I think that, I know it sounds crazy, but I very much believe in online, because I believe we're able to connect with people all over the world. You look at just this group, and we have Australia and South Africa and the Philippines, and all over the United States and London, and or not in London, but the UK. So we're connecting many continents, every day, and we're able to have these face-to-face conversations where we really feel like we get to know each other. We would not feel that. I'm sorry, it's not going to be the same with a bunch of avatars. Like, this would never survive with avatars. Next question.
And it comes from Roscoe Jones, and I have reset my prompter so that it's right in front of the lens now. What role does eye contact play in digital first events? In hybrids, the performer has to choose where their eyes are looking. Does the digital first event viewer want the lens pegged? We rarely peg the lens in films, as in Breaking the Fourth Wall.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to remember to do, to look into the lens. I encourage you to look back at I looked back at the YouTube at one of the ones where I answered a question and I was looking down like this. And I just realized, it was so, I felt so embarrassed because it looks like, yeah, I'm introverted. I don't want to, which I am anyway, but I didn't want to talk. I couldn't look at you. It's looking into the camera when you see yourself and you're talking and you are doing that, you just come across so much more engaging. And well, for me anyway, that's how I felt when I do that. But it is difficult. It is difficult, and I have to get an auto prompt and auto cue too.
Yeah, and that's why we use teleprompters all the time. And that's what Errol Morris found long before us was 30 years ago, 40 years ago, of having people look at the director. And once you get used to that, I have to admit, I don't know if I think I tweeted about this last week or the week before, but wow, looking at interviews where people are looking off like this feels so weird now. To me, it just feels so weird. It's because I'm used to people looking straight in. Now, what I do, is I'm trying to constantly one of the groundbreaking things for me was when Zoom lets you move little squares. So when people talk, I move their squares right under the camera. So I'm constantly, you'll see me clicking, I'm constantly dragging people to the top because my eye contact isn't right on, but it's not that far off, and I can, so I'm trying to close that gap now. And the main reason is that it's hard to see the whole group. And because of the way Zoom doesn't let you have a base, it doesn't let me have my home screen with all the controls on the teleprompter. I want to put the grid on the teleprompter and the other, anyway, it's a limitation of Zoom is why I don't use a teleprompter. But when they fix that someday, I'll probably go back to that because I did do it for a while and I just found it frustrating to control. Anyway, I think it's really important. I think that's another example where the Stanford article went, like, people get tired of eye contact. And I'm like, have you read any information about any speaker or any, every book is make eye contact. Like everything is make eye contact. And I can tell you, as someone who had a really hard time making contact, it was not something that came natural to me. I am very much a non-eye contact person. And I had to train myself to look at people in the eye, and I got really good at it. I'm pretty good at it now. If you see me in person, and I do a pretty good, because I know how much of a difference it made. It literally opened up all kinds of possibilities in my life because I'm able to make eye contact. And it was not a natural skill for me. My natural skill is to look everywhere but someone's eyes. But when you get good at it, not only do you feel more connected to people, but a lot more happens. Go ahead, Daniel, and then Bill.
I feel like when I'm talking, I'm all over the place, but I think, even you're talking about having your talent do it, they need to have either, the confidence to do it, the practice to do it, or the technical setup to do it. If they want a teleprompter, we can shoot them a prompter through Zoom, but, they're still not looking at the lens. Right. Getting them set up where, it's up close to the camera is the best we can do for a lot of people.
Right. And one of the things I do when I talk to people about it, because they're like, well, I just want to be myself. I'm like, okay, so people used to smoke, like the people who ran in the Olympics used to smoke, at the beginning, 100 years ago or 120 years ago. And kids in high school can outrun them. Like now, how did that happen? It's because they developed skills. They had critical, like you look at the amount of science just sitting on YouTube on how to throw a baseball. It's why all these baseball players are so much better and these football players are so much better than they were 20 or 30 years ago, is because we got trained in an organized sort of way. It wasn't like, oh, we're just going to throw the ball the way we feel like throwing the ball. It turns out there's some mechanics, and if you do the mechanics correctly, you can throw the ball a lot farther than you could before. And I think that people have to decide, do you want to be a top tier talent on air or do you not? And you just have to decide what that looks like. Go ahead, Bill.
For me, there's two different roles. If I'm a host of something, I want to be able to engage the audience directly. In a role like I'm playing right now, I'm reading the questions. So when I'm looking over here, I'm reading somebody else's content, and I'd like to keep that separation. This is me answering a question directly. Right. Now, I do find that I get so conditioned to walking around and paying attention to the interface that I tend to find myself talking even though I'm not looking at the camera. That is a thing I have to be better at, and I have to train myself to do. But I think there's two modes.
And a lot of us in the United States, at least, grew up with the master of this. There was a master of digital first event. His name was Mr. Rogers. Like, there's a whole thing about him going off on how it makes eye contact with the kids, and he had that down pat 50 years ago. Stuart.
The equivalent to Mr. Rogers here in Australia is Humphrey B. Bear, which is a guy in a bear suit.
Right.
But just to the point of the breaking the fourth wall and what have you, in film, you're meant to be following the conversation that the characters are having with each other, not the characters are having with you, but one of the most successful films out there, which is Deadpool, has him breaking the fourth wall all the time.
It's
the
really
thing
enjoyable.
That really bugging me watching local TV lately is all the news channels are telling their camera operators to get the person they're interviewing to look down the side of the camera, like where you'd be looking if you were talking to a person who's actually there, because they want the viewer at home to still think that there's a reporter there. It's not just the camera operator holding the microphone out. Right. Well, but you look compared to this, and people concentrate and listen and to what each other are saying via Zoom far more than what they do listening to any news service anymore.
Well, and one of the things one thing that was interesting, we had this, we did this thing for Virgin, their entrepreneurial wing, and Richard Branson had this thing that he really liked to do, which is to have everyone in a circle talking to each other. You have a crowd, but you shoot the cameras through, at the people, and the people just talk to each other, right? When they brought that to us, I was like, that is crazy. Like there's a reason that there's a stage on one side of the room. It's because all the cameras are on the other side of the room. And I was completely discombobulated. Like, this isn't going to work. And we survived the first one. We didn't have a lot of time to set up our test. But there were a couple moments in there I was like, oh, he's right. Like it's so much better to watch. And so if you look at, that was what that drove us, was us turning that up to in the Final Cut user groups. If you go to the Pixelcore YouTube page, and you look at the old, and maybe mine has a couple of them, but the Final Cut user groups, where we literally had everybody, we built a round table that was built for that Final Cut user group, and we're looking at each other, but the cameras are shooting the gaps between every person. Turns out odd numbers work well, 5 people, 3 people, 7 people, because you have gaps that you can shoot straight to that person. I found that to be so much more engaging. Like to have this thing where you're watching it and you got head up of every person almost looking at you as you're talking. It felt like they were talking to you, rather than, and so I think that is a really, interesting way of managing that process. Okay. Next question. We're going to, we didn't have any questions at the beginning. Now we're running out of time. All right. Next question.
Jan Landy actually pinged me about this one. Is there a monitor with a camera built into the screen, for example, a teleprompter? And if there isn't, what teleprompter would you recommend so that when I'm in a Zoom meeting, I will be able to look at the screen and look into the camera simultaneously?
Go ahead, Jason.
I'm a sucker for prompter people. I have both a smaller one and a really big one off just to my right, and they're spectacular. They're a little pricey, but boy, are they spectacular.
If you're just looking at one person and you have it up there, the iCan one works pretty well. I mean, it's a lot less expensive, but the prompter people ones, as far as really showing the whole grid that you want to look at, is I think a better solution. And then you can build them, and we've shown a couple of them. It's just a piece of glass. We're going 45 degrees. Next, go ahead, Guy. You look like you're about to show
something.
Sure,
yeah. I'm going to pop over to program 2. And I mean, that's the prompter look straight down the middle. Yep. So Alex, if I can see him pretty big, got the script to the right, and I got the gallery view to the left. And then, there's the monitor down below and the glass and big old trapezoid prompter people monitor. It's pretty cool.
It's great. Yeah, absolutely. It makes a huge difference. But prompter people are probably the leaders in that group. If you're not doing it yourself, or the small icons is what we buy a lot of and send out because they're easy to send out. Go ahead, Brant, and then Bill. Real quick, we're gonna keep moving quick.
Yeah, real quick. Another option is I'm actually using a glide gear that takes an iPad, and then I'm using Duet Display to run the display to the iPad via hardline cable, and it works fantastic.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, absolutely. Bill.
And if you want to be really cheap, this one I got off of, that's what I'm using right now. It's $200 and it came off of Amazon. It has a plastic sled, so I would not use this in the field for regular teleprompting. But if you're going to set it up on your desk and leave it there forever, it'll work just fine.
That's great. Next question.
Moving on to Michael Vosbein. Michael Vosbein of Woodstock, Georgia says, would artists be compensated more for live events, clubs, concerts, and so forth if they are broadcast on the net?
There's probably a whole second hour that we could dedicate to that. What I will say in short, though, is that a lot of, I don't think I can get into the numbers, but there was a band that I think it was, there's been some bands that would do 40, 50 shows and make between 60 and $100 million. And then they figured out they could do 3 shows and make 20. And there was a whole lot of like, there's been a couple artists that just went, oh, right. Like we could make a lot more money if we weren't having to tour around and do all the other things. And, most artists, when they go on tour, they say, I just missed the fans and I did, but it's grueling. The first, handful of concerts is really fun, but you could always tell when I used to work for Sony, my job was to drive the bands around town and for interviews. So I drive Alice in Chains or Indigo Girls or someone else around. And so they get their interviews. You could always tell if they're in the front half of the tour or the back half. Front half, they're giddy, they're having a good time, they're excited to talk to everyone. Last half, they're just like literally sleeping in the car between the radio hits, and then just kind of waking up and saying whatever they got to say and go. So finding that happy space where they can do a show a month, would be something that would be really exciting to a lot of bands that I've worked with. And my wife used to tour with a band. She was one of the dancers in the back, and she's like, "Yeah, they just do it for the money." Like it's like you make a lot of money doing it. Bill, and then Chris.
So the question for me is, what's the revenue model? If you're just putting a camera in a bar when bars come back, and you're not making any more money by doing that, then there's no revenue to share.
Well,
now, if you're promoting t-shirt or swag sales and you're actually selling stuff and generating revenue, there's an argument to be made that should be shared with the band because that's what's attracting the eyeballs in the first place. I just think it's more complicated than one way or the other.
Bands need to move past transactional relationships with their fans. They need to build a community that their fans are part of. And you can see bands doing that. Some bands are doing that successfully on Patreon. You look at an Amanda Palmer, she's a reasonably good artist, but what she's really good is she's got this huge fan base that pays her every month to be her. Like she's literally just being paid to be her, and she's making a lot of money, and the 3 girls in Mexico City that did the Metallica cover, of Enter the Sandman. There's these 3 girls that just do 3 girls, Mexico City Metallica, Enter the Sandman. Those girls are making more than most of us per month, and they are just down there doing their thing in their basement. So it's definitely doable. What it takes is the ability, the ongoing willingness to interact with your audience, to do something regularly, to build up a community around who you are. And some bands can't do that. They don't want to. And, there's always bands in whatever time frame have what it takes to be big, and bands that don't. And it doesn't mean that they're talented or not talented. It's just that they're in the right place at the right time. And the bands that can build community, I think, are the bands of the next generation. Daniel?
Going to probably point out an outlier, but Fish is a band that, they've been live streaming, since the 90s, I want to say. They actually haven't done any, live performances streamed since COVID hit. I'm a fan, so I'm part of that community. Fish. And, they've got a good web model. Like I'll be on site for an event, and I will after we wrap, I'll pull up the concert on my phone if they're live, halfway across the nation. And
Fish is this amazing. Like I didn't know how much Fish streamed and how much they made streaming. And we happened to work with a company that manages some of that for them, and it is like looking into the sun. Like they're doing so well, and they're just doing their thing. They are who they are, and they don't have to do anything different. The ability to micro collect large audiences from all over the world instead of having to go find them in every city is super efficient. Next question.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. Oh, you're going to say one more thing, Daniel?
Just to add on to what Trey is the guitarist of Fish, and he did the Beacon Jams was the only thing I think really, associated with that they did live. It was a fundraiser. He was at the Beacon every Friday night live.
It was fun. I saw it. It was well done.
Yeah, it was awesome. And they brought in a ton of money for it too. So, fundraising it all depends on your community, I suppose.
Yeah.
How you build it. So,
and that community takes a long time. You know, like that's the hard part, is that people want, oh, how do I make money? Well, I did a concert, didn't make any money. It takes months, years of willingness to do that, to get off the ground. Next question.
Michael Fraley of Dallas Fort Worth says, do you tell what clients what colors they can wear or what not to wear?
Go ahead, Bill.
That's your job. If you are shooting and presenting, and if you're coming in with a houndstooth check jacket and it's crawling all over the video, it is my job to tell you that.
Yeah.
And if your colors are not working with the lighting plot or something else, and you're going to look washed out or underexposed or whatever, my responsibility is to present you the best I can. So if you don't tell them, I think that's malpractice on your part as an image maker.
Ooh, that's heavy. Yeah. Bill dropped the hammer. So the I agree with you. The big things that we tell them is, no, try not to wear white. You know, so pure white is really something that doesn't compress well. Pure red, pure black. Those are things that we try to get them. And then we prefer you not to have patterns. You know, patterns and definitely, as Bill said, those kinds of jackets and so on and so forth. You'll see from me, desaturated. I believe that desaturated colors and things that move more towards gray tend to allow your face to be more prominent in color, and so it is. I find that to be a better situation. You don't fall into the background as much. Go ahead, Chris.
I would always tell people, no white, no black, no red, and no aluminum foil.
There we go. All right, next question.
For those who are wearing a aluminum foil cap to keep the rays out, doesn't work. Michael Frady has done. Lou Perez in Phoenix. I have tried Ethernet over AC in the past, and the latency was so bad it couldn't keep a VPN connection active. What hardware do you send people, Jason?
Real quick, Jason. We're speed round. Do you have anything? Do you have a specific brand?
For the Ethernet over AC, I like the Netgear Gigabit. I can put it in Mukana, but I don't have the exact link right now. What I like about this one is that it takes an outlet, but then it gives you inline an outlet straight away. So you don't lose an outlet. One of the important things about these is that they have to be plugged directly into an outlet. You can't use an extension cord or a plug multiplier, but yeah, I can follow up and put it in Mukana.
Sounds good. Next question.
Doug Ferguson, Fort Wayne, Indiana, and the panel here. You mentioned one-on-one connections. If we don't have something like Mukana, how can they see chats and questions?
So go ahead, Brent.
I think a lot of the companies that are going to do well in these coming months were the event app companies. So as we were getting into the end of 2019, almost every event I was on had its own app that had Q&A and polling and chat, and in addition to where can I find this in the convention center. And I think that's going to start being the glue between our online audiences and our in-person audience as we start to reincorporate those in-person audiences.
Yep. Turns out selling jeans is useful. So anyway, in the short term, if you're just trying to communicate something and you're just trying to hack something together, Google Docs works really well. So you literally just do a Google Docs, and we did that before we had Mukana that we could push the stuff to, and we still do it when for some reason we're not able to use that. So that's been our number one way of getting that out. And you can also incorporate it when we're doing point to points. We can incorporate it into the return signal. Now that Zoom doesn't go to the return signal you can set it up so it won't go to the return signal when it loses signal from the far end. We can now put text in a super source as we return it back to the viewer. So if we want to give them text or questions or whatever, we can incorporate it right onto the video that they're getting back from us. And that requires no extra apps or other things for them. It just goes right in front of what they're looking at. And sometimes we'll even take it like, here's your return, and we'll just key over. You need to stop doing this. You'll see Mickey does something like that over top of WLM when I need to turn something up or move around. He'll put a message up, and so you can do it in the return feed as well. Next question.
Stuart Fairweather, Melbourne, Australia, in the panel's second hour suggestion, Hasmukh's guide to getting government to comprehend what they're doing wrong in Zoom.
I think it's mostly calling them and telling them they look like beep, like that. That takes some, like I said, takes some cojones. All right. Go ahead, Stuart.
Did that. It's not working.
All right. Ridicule does go a long way over time, and sometimes you have to use what we call the little hammer, which is just you're constantly tapping. From if anyone's seen Shawshank Redemption, it's the little hammer. All right, next question.
Chris Widener of Lafayette, Indiana says, Alex, if you have multiple people joining in booths, would you then use Zoom for each individually or use more traditional switching super sources and so forth?
If we have, one of the things that we're looking at is doing this thing where we have people in booths, and in that realm, our plan is mostly just literally SDI back, and return Dante and everything else, because they're all in the same building. They're so if you can, again, I think that address still looks good. Like, this is the address that I prefer in a lot of these things. Or we would use something like a roundtable, like what we've done for Final Cut User Group, where they can be around each other and talking to each other. What we did there was we actually had the Telestrator software like that. Well, we were using something previous to this, like I have here, but every person had a Wacom tablet in front of them, and then they all had a shared thing of Final Cut, so they could all jump. Anyone could control the Final Cut, and anyone could draw on top of it. And so, but it does take a little bit of practice to get kind of used to it. But Zoom is what you use when you need a consumer connection. You don't have the money or time to put it in. There's lots of things to fix it when you have more money. So when you have more money than, and you can afford it, you can, no matter where people are in the world, you can start adding things like LTN. You can add, you can go up to the switch. You can do a lot of other things to make that even better. And I think that we were talking about this in the pre-show I think there's a future where you have a lot of studios that are interconnecting via fiber, and having unified ways of doing it, so that you could go anywhere. You just know, oh, that's part of the network, the quote unquote the network for doing these. And you can just walk into probably an office in a random office building and have a little studio that is all built out for you, that follows a protocol that ties into all the other studios. It's probably going to be a big business. Next question.
Anna Marie Davis in AISPURO has our last one here. Alex, what was your initial intentions when you created the first office hours, and how has that changed? Panel, question for you as well. What was your initial reason for joining office hours, and how has that changed?
I think that number one is I finally knew that I was going to be somewhere for a while. I had been traveling for a decade, 250,000 miles a year, so it was hectic. I think that when I started it, I did feel like, so one of the initial things was that I needed to learn how to use Zoom. I didn't really understand Zoom that well. I was a Hangouts specialist, but not a Zoom specialist. And so I was like, okay, I got to do this all the time to figure it out. Number two was that I really felt like part of why Hangouts failed is that I was unwilling to share what I knew. So like, it was like we were terrified of telling anyone anything about how to do Hangouts. And what happened was people failed at Hangouts all the time. Like, it was just this constant train wreck of one role, run people. And what would happen is they would be successful once, and then they start promoting it everywhere, and then they'd crash. And it was always simple things that they were missing that we knew how to do because we were doing 3 to 5 a week, for Google. And so we knew everything about that, and I wouldn't tell anyone. It was like the secret sauce. Like, nobody gets to tell anybody about anything. We wouldn't, we were very, very secretive about how we did it. Even Google didn't know how we did it. Like we wouldn't even tell them how we were doing their own events. And because I was trying to make payroll. Anybody who has owned a company will tell you that, making payroll, once you have more than about 20 employees, most of what you think about is making payroll. So anyway, so we didn't share that information, and the entire platform failed, so I felt like, well, if I want this to succeed, I really feel like what we're doing here is changing the nature of the way humans interact, period. Like, we're changing the world, by figuring this out. And we are, and this was the moment that everybody needs it. And I felt like I'm not the only one, but I'm probably one of, at the time, I was like, I'm probably one of 10 or 15 people that really understand what this is in the world, that have done enough of these and everything else. And so if I want it to be successful, if I want it to move forward, and I want to help change the way we interact, and the fact that we can all understand each other, and that we all are sensitive to what is important in other parts of the world with other cultures. And we're just getting started. We're only to the plate people who can afford to do this. Like, how do we, I'm interested in, I have a school in Rwanda, so I'm interested in everybody having that voice, and everyone being part of that conversation, and everyone learning how to interact with each other and learning from each other. And I think that there's a new state of being that's capable when we get that going at mass. We're still in like tiny little seed. but when everyone's able to interact and be able to be part of these conversations. And the first step is training the people who are going to make the media, because they're the ones that have to help everybody else be connected, and so that's, that's why I started it, was and I didn't expect it to go this long. Like, I expected to be, I'm going to try to push this down the path as far as I can, as long as this lasts, and what I didn't expect, I guess, in this whole thing, was how many great people would show up, just amazing, such an amazing group, of people. And I am inspired every day by the people that show up for the panel, by the people who come to the questions, by the people who become part of our little Raspberry Pi thing. So it's super inspiring for me to be part of this. And I'm glad that I got to be part of the beginning of it. But I mean, I think it's way bigger than me, at this point. And I think that I learned something out of it. I get excited by just, every day, every morning. I mean, it's still effortless. I mean, I get up early and open this thing at 5 o'clock in the morning, and it's still like no thing, for me to do that, and it's just such a pleasure to be with everybody. So that's the part I didn't expect. I expected it to be something that I would teach all of you how to do this, so that, it was very arrogant at the beginning. Like, I'm going to teach everybody how to do this, because we need to get this off the ground. We're going to stop messing around with all this stupid physical stuff. It's so inefficient. And so, anyway, so that was, that's where it started. And that's what I think where it's changed is every day it becomes more us and less me, which is, I think, great. Bill?
For me, the initial spark was when COVID hit. I thought I was going to face tons of boredom, and I was literally scared about that. That's why I signed up for things like Masterclass and a whole bunch of things, because I thought, if I'm going to get cut off from the interactions I normally have, I can still do it online, but I want more. And stumbling into here was really transformative. All that stuff dropped away, and this has been satisfying curiosity in a way that nothing else I have ever experienced has. Predominantly because the panel talks about things that are important now. This transformation of society, the virtualization of things, the fact that Zoom is a part of global life now and similar services, and that if you're better at that, you do have more opportunity than if you're not as good at it. And so it was important, it was satisfying, it was ecumenical, because I did hear from people all over the globe that I would never have had a chance to connect with before. All of those things has made this hour, and the price was just getting up, a couple of hours earlier, which is not trivial for people like me. I mean, I was never an early riser, but it has been so incredibly satisfying to meet this many people, form this many connections, and learn so much without cost.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I think everybody who regularly attends the panel for office hours does so because they want to learn, and because they love the interaction, and they love the community, and they love the pop quiz that is so what do you actually know, and what can you say, at the drop of a hat and off the cuff. But, it goes two ways as far as how, personally, I met Alex, I don't remember when it was, Alex, a couple of years ago at NAB, and just saw his his pitch on Twitter, and I was
It was 2 years ago. 2 years ago.
Yeah.
We ran into at the bottom of the escalator.
That's right, bottom of the escalator. So I mean, I just I've always loved, Alex, what you've done, and I've always been slightly envious of the fact that you've been doing this way longer than I have. So, the idea that you get to bring your friends in, and I get to learn from them, and, you and I see eye to eye on a great deal, and never before has it ever been more real to me than, it has over the last year as the result of office hours.
And I will say, if you're sitting as a participant in this and you're watching this on YouTube or whatever, there is a juice to being on the panel that I would, even if you just come up and you don't say a lot, you kind of interact. Literally, what brings value to the panel is that one moment where we ask a question and you know the answer, and when and that's what makes this panel so interesting, is that it is like we just said, oh, you have to answer that. You have to ask that question tomorrow because Jeff's not here. Like that's, or Jeff and Tucker are the ones that answer that question. And the goal that I have is that eventually, and we get most days, like you can feel it when this panel gets small. Like there'll be a couple days here and there where we only have 8 or 12 people in the panel, and we miss, we just can't answer the questions as completely. And it's an entirely different kind of interaction than even I expected, of this idea that having a big panel, I will admit it, when the panel gets to about 30 active people, it gets hard. Like it's so there's like this window between 15 and 30 that is like the right number, that seems to work really well. But anyway, it's a fascinating puzzle. And so anyway, and we'll talk more about this. Our birthday is coming up. The last day of the year, our New Year's Eve or whatever, is next Wednesday. So we'll talk more about this next week. Okay, that was great. It was good. It was a good, fun talk. I was a little worried because we weren't getting any questions at the beginning. I was just like riffing. I was like, how long am I going to have to talk before we get questions or someone raises their hand? And we finally caught up. We caught speed there. So we caught some wind in the middle. So anyway, thanks to everyone who was watching. Of course, thanks to the panelists. Great conversation as always, every day. It's amazing. Yeah, just really fun. I don't know how this works. Like, it's just like every day you're like, oh, that was great. And you're like, how does that happen every single day? Anyway, we're going to jump into the post show. All right. Bye, guys.